One, I want to announce out that Jim Writing Sword, our Health and Human Services Director, has retired, and just wanted to thank him for all his work, especially with the homeless progress that we've had, homelessness in our county, and addressing that. So I wanted to thank him for that. With that as well, so we've also brought in an interim. In the meantime, her name is Tracy Belton. She'll be the interim Health and Human Services Director. So I wanted to make sure that the board is aware, the public, and staff. Wanted to remind the board next week, next Tuesday, we have a special board meeting. It's related to budget. We're going to be discussing Q2 update details, sales tax, fiscal analysis for 1920. We'll also address the budget timeline, as well as policies and potential new policies that we're going to be looking at. Outline budget adoption for 6/24/19. So I want to make sure that's in your calendar, as well as looking at revenue and expenditure projections. So that's going to be more or less the following meeting. And just so you know, we have a few other meetings in April and in May. We're going to look at teeter funds, CalPERS, investments, negotiations as well. We're going to be working on that this year, so we'll be discussing those items, general fund projected revenues, so on and so forth. So there's quite a laundry list of things that we're going to be discussing, all related to finance and budget. So I wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that and put it in their calendars. As well as
Mr. CAO, do you have those other dates, or could you get them to us as soon as possible?
Yes, they're on the calendar. They're published on our calendar.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they're the light green ones, the green dates on our calendar here.
Thank
you.
Hold on one second, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to request that we add another item to the agenda at the special meeting, a discussion on code enforcement. You know, this continues to be kind of a problem and an issue of you know, a very important function of local government, and we're not getting it done. I want to talk about our strategies and thoughts as board and administration, RMA, how we're, you know, going to address this. So if it's
not a problem, sir.
Yeah, and just so your board is aware, we definitely want to talk to your board and the public about FTEs, are kind of our hot spots like this. We were going to present that at the following meeting, but we definitely can talk about it at a high level prior to this next meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah. One other item I'd like to present is item number 7 on consent. Administration is requesting to go ahead and pull that and put it on a regular agenda today and put it at the end of the agenda, if that's okay with the board. As well as just wanted to give a quick highlight. I was able to go to NACO. We arrived, I guess, today. So we've had a long week, and but it was definitely a great visit. Supervisor Jaime de la Cruz and Supervisor Anthony Botello, I'm sure will elaborate further, but we were able to meet with Feinstein's office, Panetta's office, OMB. We were able to get in touch with the Bureau of Reclamation and to discuss San Justo Reservoir, Clear Creek, Pacheco Creek, roads, transportation, and also the autonomous vehicle project that we have. So I think it was a very good meetings that we had, and it was definitely fast-paced. A lot going on in those few days, but I'll have the two supervisors elaborate a little further if they will today or the next meeting when they're able to get all their thoughts together, because we just got in today. So with that being said, I don't know if we have any other announcements. I think that's all the announcements, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Any other announcements from management? Okay.
That's all the announcements, Mr. Chair.
Board announcements. Information only. We'll start with Supervisor Hernandez.
So I had a busy last weekend. Me and Supervisor Gilio went to the CSAC training. It was 2 days, and that was pretty fast-paced, probably not as fast-paced as the NACO conference, but it was a lot of learning, so we were there to learn the fiscal relationship with the state and how to, engage in our legislators and who our leaders are. And just there was a lot of information on HHSA and the new focus for the governor with affordable housing. And so I learned a lot. It was an awesome time. I mean, I'm right now in the works with establishing a little bit momentum with the ad hoc committees. I know with Supervisor Botello on the hemp focus, and then also with Supervisor De La Cruz on the sports complex, the early stages of it. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of learning to do, and I appreciate the time that I had with staff this weekend, and a lot of learning, and it was just very eye-opening, and I was really appreciative of all that I learned, and I really believe I could use that understanding to affect a better, ultimately do a better job in my post. Thank you.
Supervisor De La Cruz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank the staff for doing a wonderful job for organizing our paperwork and giving us a what-to-do list, and that really meant a lot because we basically didn't do or very little fun time. Staff had us running up and down, left and right, to the point where we actually, because the way my name is spelled, De La Cruz separate, the federal government didn't even let me in one of the buildings, and they were going to hold me in a cell, but somehow Ray managed to pull some of his magic and allow me to go into the meeting.
I would have put you in the cell.
But, seriously, Mr. Chair, I think it was very productive. The first person that we met was Congressman Panetta, and we talked about the San Justo Reservoir funding, opening up the Zebra Mussel. Supervisor Botello talked about the Clear Creek reopening, Pacheco Creek watershed, the importance of that, what that is in our community. And Ray was just being, proud, just like a kid in a in a candy shop, about the autonomous vehicle project that it's going to change our community. And I think we all kind of play like a three-team, and it was very wonderful. We expressed our concerns about funding, timetables, other governments that always get in the way when we try to do something in our community. And I kept pounding the concept of open San Justo Reservoir, and I couldn't get someone to listen to me. Senator Panetta says, we're working on it. In June we're going to have a pre-review process, and then summer hopefully we'll start the federal government CEQA process. And every time Mr. Panetta kept talking to us, I kept telling him, so that's another month, another year wait to reservoir. The public in San Benito County wants reservoir open today. And he says, oh, Jaime, I agree with you. And so we talked to, what's her name? What's the other lady that we talked to? Forgot her name. That we went to go talk to. Senator, U.S. Senator.
Dianne Feinstein.
Dianne Feinstein, thank you. And we talked to her staff. And there were some other issues that we were talking about, and Supervisor Botello was talking about the importance of Pacheco Creek, that it actually has a tri-regional effectiveness community, and, put it at the top of the list, don't wait for another 10 years. And then I kind of gave my personal, kind of speech to the gentleman, and I say, look, Governor Newsom is about to build a lot of low-income and affordable housings in our community. I have a lot of residents that live in our community that makes no more than $50,000, $60,000 a year. I have no problem building low-income and affordable for our members of our community. But the problem is that the federal government prevents us from building programs and projects that actually just builds for our local folks. And he basically said, no, if you talk to HUD, HUD would allow you some exemptions in which we built these homes will be for local folks. And so I actually took notes. Got his business card, and that's something I'm going to work with Ray down the road to make sure that if we built local homes for our community, they will go for our local folks, not for other people that come into our community and get those. So I was excited about that. And then we also met another gentleman. His name was OM Director Waxman, and we talked about the opening of San Justo Reservoir and the Clear Creek and the Pacheco. And I'm sorry, but the gentleman seems like he was already in his retirement years. He just didn't want to listen to us. And And then I just bounced the idea of how we could, open up San Justo Reservoir by having a vendor at San Justo Reservoir that can rent equipment, boat, fishing equipment, and just as soon as somebody goes fishing at Reservoir and they're done fishing or recreating at that place, you just leave it there and you don't contaminate the zebra mussel. And the gentleman says, I got someone for you. And so he introduced me to a young kid full of energy, and I bounced the idea to him, and his eyes just glowed. He says, you know what? I'm going to be in Denver. I'm going to give you a call and see if you come, and we can work out something. So there's hope
Awesome.
that San Justo Reservoir might be open. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Supervisor Bertello?
Well, I'm gonna have a hard time topping that report about Supervisor De La Cruz. I too want to thank the staff for organizing that trip. It's pretty complex, from the airlines, scheduling, and hotel, and back again. I know I'm gonna feel it for a few days, but I really enjoyed the opportunity to meet not only our legislators, but also to converse with other counties as far as what their experiences are with the same issues and problems that we have. Supervisor De La Cruz did do an outstanding job advocating San Justo Reservoir and reopening of that facility. And I think it's important to stay in the ears of our representatives in Washington on these issues as well. One of the things that will be a challenge with that issue, as well as the Pacheco Creek and Powero River Water Authority, Flood Prevention Authority, is, again, money. It's always comes back down to money. And, the federal government's having a tough time managing their budget, as we're all very much aware of. The seminars at the NACO conference, some of them were pretty interesting. I sat in on the Rural Communities Agricultural Issues Committee, and they set policies as far as what NACO advocates. And the period I was there that I found most interesting was immigration reform, and what counties, and a lot of these counties are very similar to us, small, rural, agriculturally based, and they're absolutely for immigration reform, and also at the bare minimum, we need to keep the numbers coming into our country at the same level or a little bit more to meet our workforce requirements. We're not there, and I was listening to this and thinking that that's very much the case in our own county and in our region. So it was interesting conversing with a number of supervisors as well, and at lunches and meeting our own vendors out back there, and sharing some ideas, which I hope we will have some fruit from, possibly even with our behavioral health building, with some ideas how we could move that project forward. So again, I thank CEO Espinoza for his leadership at the conference, and the leadership of Supervisor De La Cruz, and hopefully we come back with something here. Thank you.
Supervisor Gilio?
Thank you, Chairman Medina. I had a busy few weeks. A couple thank yous I want to give out to staff right away is our roads crew. Our roads crew is out there working very shorthanded. And in my district, District 4, our district is a very challenging district with roads. As you know, we probably have the majority of the rural roads within the county, some very long ones that are in some really bad shape. So they've been working their very hardest to just try to keep them at a manageable level. And on the next meeting agenda, we'll be discussing John Smith Road, so I'm excited to talk about that and some more permanent solutions. But again, thank you to those folks, and an update to the board, if you haven't heard officially from RMA, but I believe they hired another 3 additional roads crew folks, and they're getting up to speed now, so that's gonna help help us as well as we move forward. CSAC training, Supervisor Hernandez covered that really well. Prior to the training, I went up early and I met with Assemblymember Rivas, and then he introduced me to two separate Assembly members. And it was really good to hear from their perspective, their challenges, and how we can help them, and then also how they can help us. And what I can guarantee you in the next 4-year term that I'm here is that I'm going to make sure that Sacramento knows where we are. They don't think we're San Bernardino County, that they know we're San Benito County and where we are and what our needs are. And I think what these folks mentioned when they're at the national capital is, so to speak, the squeaky wheel sometimes gets greased, so we need to make sure that we make our needs known and make them known frequently. Thank you to Samantha Slikus. If you guys weren't aware, in the downtown she had an amazing event, and it was a personal awareness event essentially. She talked about bullying, the effects of bullying. She brought in guest speakers, and Samantha's a young woman, and her mom, Dee, supported her. But I believe that I would like to see if we can get a consensus of this board to give her a certificate of recognition for her amazing work in pulling these people together. She even had Brian Stowe come down from the Stowe Foundation and give a talk about fan bullying and how bullying changed his life, and his violence obviously changed his family's future. So I was very proud of her as a young community member setting that up on her own. It was pretty amazing. An update for the South County Highway 25 curve correction is what it's called with Caltrans on March 18th at 5:30 p.m. I will be having a meeting where Caltrans is going to come up and discuss what's happening there, why it's happened, and take feedback from the community, and that's going to be at the Inn at Tres Pinos. SNP Bus was here over the weekend. They had another successful weekend out at the airport. I went and saw them. They did doing great things out there, spaying and neutering our animals. And one of the committee meetings that I had was the Emergency Medical Committee, and this is talking specifically about the ambulance contract. Our ambulance contract, if you're not aware, expires this year, and then we go into another long-term contract with our ambulance provider. One of the topics that I was concerned about and discussed, and that ultimately we need to figure out some resolution on, and we're working on that. I think they're going to have another special meeting in a couple weeks, is there is a California statewide, possibly nationwide, shortage of paramedics. A lot of the paramedics are getting trained at private ambulance services such as AMR, and they go into fire service and they go into public service. And AMR is having a very difficult time just staffing the existing paramedic units. And we had a pretty good breadth. We had conversations from the labor groups that were there talking about it. We had AMR there, obviously. We had all of our community. There was over 20 people at this meeting, and it was pretty interesting. And one of the things that they're proposing is right now Hollister Hills pays for a paramedic in a quick response vehicle. It's basically like a mini little SUV, and they'll run up to Hollister Hills when the other ambulances are busy, and they're here 3 days a week on the weekends to cover excessive calls for service at Hollister Hills, and they pay for that. So Hollister Hills was there, and their concern is that if they downgrade that paramedic to an EMT, it becomes a BLS unit or a basic life support as opposed to an ALS unit. That's kind of the negative side. The positive side is you would actually get 2 EMTs and an ambulance that can transport people. So there's pluses and minuses there, and we're trying to figure out through our EMS folks. Chris is working on it, and Kevin, they're doing a good job staying on top of it, and I'll report back after the next meeting when I learn if we've gotten a resolution. And obviously this needs to come back to the board for a vote in the future anyway. I just wanted to keep you up to date with what's happening with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That brings us into the consent agenda. Any of the supervisors wish to pull any of the items, with the exception of number 7, which we will pull and put into number 21? Anyone from the public wishing to pull any of the consent agenda items? What's the wish of the board?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda with the exception of item number 7, which will be discussed later.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. We'll go on to public hearing. Resource Management Agency, John Girton.
Tavin Kinnison Brown, Principal Planner. I'm in for John Girton today, who's under the weather. The item before you today is to begin the initiation process to have a new 7-unit subdivision called Nguyen subdivision. It's between the Santana, it's off the Jonquil and Redbud Lane area. And this is to initiate a process, a LAFCO process, to have those 7 properties join the existing CSA 24. With the adjacency of 24 and also the kind of the donut hole in the middle of the neighboring CSAs, county staff and also the way the subdivision approval was written, it appears to make logical sense to have these 6 properties annexed into CSA 24 versus entertain a separate financial mechanism such as adding them to the CFD that is county-wide because there's an existing format and process right there. So if there are particular questions of the board, I can try to respond. I'm picking this up on the fly. Be glad to answer questions.
Well, being this is in my district, I wanted to bring up a couple concerns. Is we have, as a board, we did not want to add anything into any CSAs. We did not want to create any CSAs or bring more homes into the CSAs. Secondly is, are you aware that less than a year ago, there was a similar circumstance? I think it was 4 homes, a minor subdivision, the Clower family. They were required to either do a CFD or an HOA. So to me, it sounds like we're picking and choosing. I'm looking at this saying this has to be an HOA or a CFD, similar to the Clower development. And why was the Clower development not allowed to join into this CSA like they asked?
You know, I can't really speak to those. I've been planning about 30 years, and in my experience, you really need a good body of homes together, 50, 75 plus, to really have an effective HOA that's got constant management. They keep their books, they keep their notes and records. And when you have, 6 or 4, those things can become really problematic, especially if new homeowners don't build or even the seller, right? Because right now we have one owner on all 6 properties, but if we don't have new residents come in and new paying, we might have one person there with an HOA of one person for many years. So with the existing opportunities to join the CSA 24 that already has provisions for street sweeping and street maintenance, et cetera, as detailed in the report, that seemed to be the practice.
Well, then once again, why were the Clower development required to do an HOA?
I think, if I could interject.
Yes.
And I haven't looked at this issue specifically, but I believe the Clower subdivision is a more recent subdivision, and the CFDs probably weren't like in concept when this Nguyen subdivision.
No, this was before. Clower's was before this one.
Clower's before this
Yeah,
one?
they're
But when
already
was
up and
this
going.
approved? I heard that this was an old subdivision. Was it a new subdivision or
The
old?
approval date on this, from the records I have here in the staff report, is September 2016.
Yeah, the Clowers were before that.
Okay.
So my only
I
question,
can't speak to the Clower project.
this was a year ago. Were you here a year ago?
Yeah, April 2017.
Okay. Yeah, so that's my only concern is it's the same in the same area. It's 4 houses, like you said, because I agree with what you're saying.
Are you looking for revenue neutrality, or are you looking for equal treatment in some
Equal
way?
treatment. And then the second part is neutral revenue, or I should say expense. But what I'm looking at also is what will be charged for that CSA for the new development for the 6 homes. Is it 6 homes or 8 homes?
You started with a single parcel, and at the end of the day, there's going to be 7.
Okay, so what?
That's the creation of 6.
Yeah. So what's the actual expense for that homeowner for the CSA?
I don't have those dollars and cents in front of us.
Okay. So I think we need to go back and look at, like you're saying, equal treatment. Or an HOA or a CFD, one of the two.
Well, I believe each of those options can be pursued the way the resolution's written. It appears that.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? Thank you for coming in. I appreciate it, and on short notice.
Yeah, kind of on the fly.
Yeah, sorry you didn't have time to prepare. It's unfortunate. The question I have, since I've been on the board, we've dealt with one project, and that was on Southside Road. And this was just at our last meeting, so it's pretty fresh in my mind. And we saw in the development agreement that there was a necessity to start a CFD or an HOA. They chose CFD, and we were okay with that. And I think we all voted, or not all of us, but many of us voted on the board to go ahead and approve the final map as stated in the development agreement. And right across the street, there's a CSA there. There's CSA for Riverview Estates, and we didn't try to annex them into the CSA. And I think I'd like to know more about this before I render a vote on it, because it seems like we're trying to get away from CSAs and transition into the CFD model like the city's been doing, CSA model. So what are your thoughts on that?
Maybe I can alert County Council to maybe speak to that, because there were several subdivisions pending and coming together. The county has a policy of revenue neutrality so that there's not a burden to the public taxpayer for the infrastructure that will serve these developments. And County Council was instrumental in helping form a CFD that additional properties could join. And so maybe you can speak to that when there's the small development, the 4s and the 6.
Right. I think that
where's the discretion for it should be CFD or should be CSA?
Well, I haven't looked at the conditions of approval for this project, but if it was before a certain period of time, then it wouldn't have been put as a condition of approval to join a CFD, because the standard conditions of approval for the prior subdivisions were either to join a CSA or an HOA. So we could look at the conditions of approval, and it's only the more recent subdivisions that have the CFD. So I think that the board has directed that as a more recent format that the subdivisions join a CFD, and we are implementing that, I believe, in all the new subdivisions. And that actually helps us even more than the CFD model, because we've been able to get greater fiscal neutrality on the more recent subdivisions, because they're paying not only for project-specific benefits, they're also paying for general government costs. So, I mean, I guess we could continue this and look at the conditions of approval for this subdivision and discuss with is it still one property owner, or is it one property owner that still owns the property? We could discuss with them whether they would want to go in with the CSD or CSA. CFD, I'm sorry.
My understanding is the revenue neutrality, CFD, CSA, finding that revenue neutrality is the last check mark before approval of their final map.
Okay.
And so just to note, in this neighborhood right now is the 6 or 7 units, kind of looks like a little donut hole between CSA 14 and CSA, I think it's CSA 24. And so this proposal by staff, and you'll certainly make the decision you wish to, does not create a new CSA or anything like that. It actually adds 6, 7 property owners to an existing CSA, which you could say maybe have more ratepayers and a little more stability in that CSA. But we haven't added something new, like all of a sudden 6 properties under the CFD where there's already neighborhood. So
would you like to pass it till later in the agenda, and we could check those conditions of approval, or would you like to bring it back at a future meeting? Or
once again, what my problem that I have right now is equal treatment. You have a subdivision of 4, which follows exactly what you're saying, Tavin, and they weren't allowed into the CSA. So that's where I have an issue.
I would also just comment, though, that you noted when I joined the county almost 2 years ago this April, it's almost a long timer for the RMA. I think you've had engaged and professional staff enjoying, and we've also created mechanisms like the CFD and I think improved our planning processes. So we might have, I think, a little stronger, sharper professional skills and opportunities here, things that might not have been available to the decision makers at the time Mr. Clower was here. So institutions do get to learn.
So if we do something
get
like
to
this, is
mature,
it
we
possible
do
to
get to-
dissolve the HOA and have them come into the CSA?
I'm sorry. Come again.
If we were to vote on this for fair treatment, would it be wise for us to have them dissolve the homeowners association and join the CSA?
The item before you right now is a recommendation to start a LAFCO process, which is needed for changing the boundaries of participants in a CSA. You would not need a LAFCO process necessarily to insist on a 6-property HOA.
Okay.
Its effectiveness and how it would be implemented over time and funded by the one property owner until it's just problematic.
Okay.
But if you wish us, what I don't know is how much the time that's ticking on this map before it expires or things like that. I'd have to look at that. But if it's your wish for us to bring additional information, that's your pleasure.
Supervisor Patello?
Yeah, thank you very much. I see the concern that the chair has on this, of course, but at LAFCO we were talking about consolidating CSAs, and I'm looking at this map right now, and there's CSA 16 adjacent to CSA 24, and then I think the chair's concern was that there's a little minor subdivision that was not included in either of the 2 CSAs that are adjacent to it, and that's concerning, because what's going to end up happening is that it gets developed and people move in, the developer is gone, and they expect their roads to be taken care of exactly the same way as maybe the CSA with the higher level of service. They're well, I don't care. I pay my property taxes, and I can understand the necessity of being consistent and moving forward with making sure that they're in one of the 2 CSAs, and there should be just one CSA for that whole area. I'm looking at this map without knowing the layout from driving in it, but it really, CSA 16 and 24 should be consolidated. The Clower unit should have been included, but it wasn't at the time, and hopefully LAFCO could address some of this. But it should go to the highest level of service and reimbursement, CFD, CSA, whatever you want to call it. We need to be reimbursed for services rendered out there.
Any other comments? Any public comment?
Hi, my name is Ann Hall with San Benito Engineering. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, and I think I can shed some light on some of the questions that you've asked. So first, addressing just the Nguyen subdivision, Rosebud Avenue was built about 15 years ago, 12 years ago, under the Gonzales Estates subdivision, and it built 2/3 of the Rosebud. This Nguyen subdivision has built the other third of the road and ties into the same storm drain system. So you have CSA 16, which is already maintaining 2/3 of the road, and now this has built the other third of the road. So there was discussion that it makes sense to have the whole road in one CSA rather than have a portion of road in one maintenance vehicle and a portion of the road in the other maintenance vehicle. This was conditioned at the time to allow either a CFD or a CSA or an HOA as that maintenance vehicle. And this was conditioned shortly, I think the month after the Clower subdivision. So the Clower subdivision at the time, for whatever reason, were not allowed to join the CSA. And the countywide CFD was not in place yet, so they had to do an HOA. However, I've been in contact with Alan Andred, who's the engineer for the Clower subdivision, on and off through this process because we're right next to each other. And that CSA, their HOA was written so they could fold into either a CFD, when it became available, or the CSA if that became an option. I think part of the issue with, I'm guessing, but part of the issue with their subdivision is, I'm not sure it was fully contiguous to CSA 16. This subdivision is, and like I said, the discussions with, they've pretty much been done with construction for about 5 months now, and there's been a lot of back and forth. Some of the time, Barbara, while you were out, with the county council regarding the CSA, county council regarding the CFD, and then Jessica Stratton, who's doing the CSAs. And ultimately, the decision was that it made more sense to bring this into a CSA that it was already maintaining 3/4 of what they were joining into. Like I said, the road, the streetlights, everything else that they're adding to the CSA is in common with what's already in CSA 16. And then once this is joined, then Clower is contiguous to this, and I think there would be an opportunity then for Clower to also join CSA 16. I can't speak to that really. You're only here about Nguyen. But believe me, I've been talking to Alan quite a bit because we were trying to do this in concert. We've been far enough behind, I think, that the countywide CFD came into place, which wasn't in place at the time they were doing it. But like I said, the conversations with the county indicated that the CSA 16 made more sense. So that's why we put it
24.
I'll be honest, whichever one we're
24. Yeah, 24.
24.
I know what you mean.
Whichever, the one that already covers Rosebud.
Yes, ma'am.
And then you're right, because there was back and forth whether it was going to be 16 or 24. So I know I'm done, but I wanted to, I hope that helps answer some of the questions.
It does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other speaker cards? Bring it back to the board. Any questions from?
Mr. Oh, sorry.
Through it in.
Yeah.
Good.
So the way I understand this is just the county moving forward with an annexation request through LAFCO for just Sunny Slope water. Is there sewer service or?
No, I see that
For the CSA.
they already have the can and will for the sewer and water. Yeah.
Okay.
CSA.
It's plumbed.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, this is all county, right? This is all.
Yes, it's all county.
CSAs.
Mr. Chair, with the new information, it sounds like that they're sharing storm drains, sharing a third of the road. It seems to me to make sense to, and I'm prepared to make a motion unless you have any further discussion.
Actually, I do have another question.
Supervisor De La Cruz.
Kind of interesting to hear that we can add a development into a CSA if there's history already on a CSA in terms of what are the costs, what they're paying to. For example, the Clowers of the 4 units move into a CSA. To determine, I guess it's for you, to determine which CSA to go, you need to make sure that there's some consistency beneficial to joining a CSA, right? You just can't grab a high taxing community and put it into a CSA and says, oh, the rest of the homeowners, guess what? You're now going to have to pay more. Is that something that's thought?
Well, there's a certain amount of voting that goes along, and people look at the math before they write their checkbook.
Okay, so
that,
I hope
that is fleshed out.
Okay, I hope that the CSAs, the current CSAs, are smart enough to say, okay, this is a benefit or not a benefit, and they voice their concern through that voting process.
Yeah, so it might be a little more rare because when at the beginning, when you're creating property, you still have one property owner that's creating a map. Over time, you end up with 4, 5, 6, 30 property owners, and you get herding cats, and can you get them all into agreement? But maybe the Clower is small enough, and sounds like what we learned from Ann Hall is the writing was there that gave them the opportunity that if their HOA structure becomes awkward, that they can join the CFD and basically just take care of maintenance.
The CFD or the CSA?
The CSA.
Thanks. Thanks, Dad.
I have just one experience. Hollister Estates. They had 3 or 4 houses on the road going in that was not part of the CSA. That was in the back, and it just turns out to be a fight. It just does when it's not consistent. And if we could make it consistent coming out of the gate, we'll be a whole lot better off.
Yeah, when you look at the map, through the chair, that this is literally is in a like you described it very well, Tavin. It's a donut hole in the middle of CSAs.
Yep.
And I don't know LAFCO well enough. I will be learning LAFCO now, and I'd like to see if there's a way to combine these into one cohesive CSA unit that kind of makes sense for the county and for all the neighbors there. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but maybe we can look at that in the future.
Supervisor Hernandez, any comments?
No, I don't have a CSA in my district.
What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion that we approve sending this to LAFCO for review of annexation into CSA 24.
Adopting the resolution. And I note that the exhibits are attached as the map and the legal description.
With the county attorney's amendments, that's my motion. Thank you.
Give a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 5-0. Go on to the regular agenda. The Agriculture Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'd like to invite up our management analyst, Dulce Alonso. She's going to go ahead and open this item up. Unfortunately, our Ag Commissioner is at a conference today.
Good morning, Board. I'm going to open the staff report so I can bring up the range. But what I want to bring up is the voters approved a range of taxes at the June 5th election. And through resolution, the board can set a specific tax based on the range that was approved by our voters. So the tax wouldn't be imposed until July of 2020. So we still have a little bit of time, and we can make adjustments to the numbers that are on the resolution as part of the attachment. But give me 1 second. Let me bring those up. And there's one correction that I want to pass out, and I have some further back. So on the exhibit, there's a correction for retailers delivery only, and it was increased to 3% instead of the which is the highest allowable item. And I'm just pulling up. So here's the ranges, which was part of the staff report. But for outdoor cultivation, the range begins at 3, and the max we're allowed to charge is 17. For distributors, it's 2%. The max we can charge is 4%. For transportation only, the minimum we can charge is 0.5%, and the max is 4%. Manufacturing ranges from 2.5 to 4. Cannabis micro businesses range from 4% to 5%. And then micro businesses, non-retailer. So the ranges are here before you. I also looked at what other counties are charging, specifically our neighboring counties, and then Lake County is very similar to us in size. However, our economy is very dynamic and different than theirs. But I also wanted to put them up as a comparison because they're very similar to a county of our size. So I have David here before you from HDL. Let me show you the analysis that it was based on, and then he's going to describe why we're recommending to go with the lower range of this. So this is for. Okay. So this is our analysis based on various scenarios and various assumptions. So we're assuming at the minimum that we at least get 28 cannabis businesses here in San Benito County. And if we take a very conservative approach, which is the lowest tax rate, that would estimate us bringing in 1.1 mil. And at the high end, if we get up to 77 cannabis businesses, at the low tax rate, that could bring in 3.6 million, and then and that's based on setting the lowest rate, as you see here, for various activities. And then there's a more conservative approach, also same assumptions, at the minimum at least 28, max 77, and that can range from 1.7 mil to 5.5 mil. And then at the higher end, if we go with the higher tax rate, it could generate anywhere from 2.4 up to 7.5. So I have David here, who's going to talk a little bit more about the recommendation.
Thank you, Dulce. Chair, members of the board. Some of the things as time has gone on is really the dynamics of how this industry has changed in the last 3 years. 3 years ago, when Monterey County and other counties, Humboldt and Mendocino, were looking at doing ballot measures, it was when the volume was there, but there was very little agencies that were looking at doing this. After Prop 64, we saw a transformation of that, kind of a reality check where those that were coming into the market are coming in the market, those that don't. But also tax rates changing. Monterey started off with a $15 a square foot. The concern as the saturation of market came into place is how is it going to be sustainable for businesses that come into there. And so, and at that time, we only had probably 15 to 20 agencies statewide that were looking at allowing cannabis activities in their communities. Today, we have over 150 of them. So that transformation of a saturated market, a stabilization, and a reality check about what is their true threshold of taxes are acceptable. The other thing that's unique about why taxes are kind of where that pain point is that we didn't have Prop 64 into effect. In 2018, Prop 64 went into effect and the excise tax went into effect, which means now we went from a zero tax on an industry at a state level to a 15%, plus there's a cultivation, a per pound tax on them, which averages about $150 a pound on the taxation at the state level with the excise tax. So we shared with you about last August about that vertical tax of 30%, and when you start taxing every type of the function here, plus at the state level and the competition where the price and the margins are down, where businesses are making 35 to 40%, they're down to somewhere in the 15 to 20 now, and as more businesses get up, their margins are going to get even smaller than that. So the goal really here in the taxing element to start off is twofold. One is to make sure that whatever business you bring into the community is going to be sustainable. Secondly, what we're finding is most of them, especially in the cultivation side, even a month ago at the state level, there was almost 6,500 permits that had temporary licenses at the state. A month later, those temporary license expired, there's 1,000 less cultivators in the state of California. There's 5,400. Next month, we may see that again. Why? Because they don't have enough capital to get their businesses up. They're having to pay so much regulation out of that the capital is shifting on them. So part of the goal that we had here was to create the rate at the base so that you can encourage the businesses to get up and running, evaluate how they're doing in their performances, and also be realistic of what a tax revenue that may be come in so that you don't see bigger numbers and then expect something, and the reality is that those numbers don't come in, versus setting a rate and encouraging businesses and the surrounding communities that if there's, wanting to be here to say there's an opportunity here because we're making it sustainable for you, evaluate it, and then address the taxes. As Dulce say, you have the ability to move that rate up as you see there's an ability and an opportunity to generate more revenue and that the business can sustain that. So wanted to share that with you. The other thing is, as you look at the surrounding, for example, Santa Cruz, even though Santa Cruz has a rate and they're always talking about progressing it up, they don't have any cultivators even up, and they've got a native industry that's been there. They got 240 potential people that were there for the last 5 years, and yet they don't have people moving up. You look at what Hollister is when they permitted 34, and they probably have less than 4 that are up and running in 2.5 years because it's a combination of all of these things. So wanted to share that with you. The second one is the correction on the retail. It was a calculation error on that because we thought it was 0.5%. Is The state regulations changed on retail, as we talked about. Deliveries have to be permitted into the county based on state regulation, and therefore, because the surrounding areas have a higher tax rate than the 3%, they're going to be more encouraged to actually want to pay a tax to you versus to San Jose or to Hollister, because your rate will be lower actually than what they would have to pay if they reported it to their home base. So it's kind of an incentive to you, and I know that your concern was having them here, so if they're going to be here, you might as well tax them at a very equitable rate, and 3% is a very respectable rate that we felt to why you can remove that up. So with that, I'll be more happy to answer any questions, if you would, Chair.
I'd like to start off, and then we'll go to Supervisor Botello. One of the things I'm looking at is the $3. If our neighboring communities are at $5, I will not subsidize any of these growers by the $2. What you're saying is because of Prop 64, we're basically decreasing the price to make it more, I should say the barriers of entry would be easier for these growers. We can't start with 3. We need to start with at least what the market is. The market's 5. So that's a 66% increase in revenue. Now, will keep people away from San Benito County? Well, I'd rather find out that way than have it at a lower price and lose on that revenue. So that's kind of what I'm looking at is I just can't see us trying to be lower than Monterey, because I know Monterey started out at 15. Now they're at 5 and 8, 5 for indoor and 8 for outdoor respectively. So what I'm looking at is a larger number than the $3. But I do thank you, Dulce, for all the work you did on this. Appreciate it. Supervisor Botello?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you. I'm having a hard time believing that the tax is the major growing expense, the local tax, in regards to just all the other inputs that you have to have. If, $2 is going to put you out of business, we don't want that business here anyway. We're not hungry for cannabis businesses, so to speak. I think the county is at 100% employment today. My business, other businesses, that there would be competing for the workforce if we do have a lot of interest in this. I'm not looking forward to that, but what I am concerned about is making sure that it's worthwhile for this county to do. And at $3, it's just, I don't see the revenue. And why should we be the lowest in the market? I talked to a number of supervisors this past week, and the ones that did not ban it altogether, they're at $5, $6. They're better, and even the table that's above us. I don't think we should strive to be the lowest within the region. And I think we need to make sure we have enough revenue that not only are we recouping, our costs, but we're making good on the promise that it's a benefit to the county, that a positive cash flow that, we could utilize for our parks, our public safety, and roads. So I'm not going to support $3. I think we need to be better than $5 and adjust some of these percentages on these other activities.
Supervisor Gilio?
Thank you. I wanted to echo the comments and thank the chair and Anthony for the comments. I won't go into the exact same comments you made. I'll just add a couple items on there. Since this has started, at the city, it seems to be a race to the bottom. Who's going to charge the least amount so you can get more business in your county? And I understand it's naturally a competition, that's the way competition breeds, that's the way business works. However, we need to ensure that we're covering all of our tax base. And I can tell you, if you go to the city and you talk to the folks in the city about their expected revenues, and I'm just talking about locally here because I was there watching it, and you may be able to speak to this more regionally or globally, expected revenues are one thing, and then what the actual revenues are two completely different animals. Yeah, very, very small amounts of revenue. And it may be because it takes time to get these operations up. I'm not familiar with the way cannabis works, but it could take years for them to get going before you actually see these revenues. But, you know, as one thing I want to caution all of my board members and our staff about is just because you approve a certain rate and you see across this nice pretty spreadsheet here about how much money revenue could be coming into the county, don't expect that right away or maybe even for the first several years, because it will take some time. And making one comment on Lake County, because I saw that one was included on here. I just happened to sit with a gentleman, supervisor from Lake County. His first name's Bruno. I'm losing his second name right now. Peter and I were at the same table with him, Supervisor Hernandez. And they are a completely different animal from San Benito County. They are, no offense to Lake County, but they are severely economically depressed and hurting for funds and revenue. And it looks like, you know, by charging $1, they're hoping to really lure folks into that area. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Dela Cruz.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've said it all along that in my district, it is very highly in support of the cannabis and the medical activity. However, I will not support the lowest $3. Is just that's insane, I think. And I mean, we already got about requests from our departments about how to fill our some of those positions that we're going to need, and I don't think $3 is going to cut it. I'm sorry, but this is more than of an insult. And I mean, I'm willing to go $6 if I can get support, but I just can't support $3. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Hernandez.
I'll keep my comments short. I appreciate the comments of my colleagues here because I definitely, I mean, at the end of the day, the biggest thing to me is our most valuable resource is really our land. And when we're thinking about how we're implementing things like marijuana that would impact, you know, our community, our economy, we have to think about the positives and the negatives. So it's not about, as a small business owner, it's not about how much money you make. It's at the end of the day how much net you can actually, you know, how much net you can actually have. Because, when we're talking about the impacts of cannabis, there's still a lot of questions about it. And with the ordinance itself says that we're already in a saturated market. So I definitely agree with Supervisor Gilio that we can't be in the race to the bottom. If we value our community, we have to sell it at the highest price to the highest bidder. And we have to be willing to fight for what we believe in for our community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any comment from the public?
Chair, if I may respond to a few of the comments just to give you some insight.
Yes, sir.
So one of the things that we're identifying, if you look at some of your surrounding communities, they were based on gross receipt. They were already fighting the dilemma where, because they're on gross receipt, businesses are actually strategically looking at where they can shift their gross receipts and move it to other places to kind of reduce and play the capital game of how they can save their net profits as a result of looking at strategies of that cost. And so one of the reasons why we came to you as a recommendation of $3 is twofold. And I think the comment of one of the members was that, we're not going to see this right away. And so if we're really looking at 12 to 18 months, the goal is that if you adopted it today, you might not see a tax for 18 months. And in that 18 months, what you're going to see is a whole nother evolution of businesses coming up and running, getting structured, settling. And then the goal is that do you have enough capital for these businesses in the front end to know, like, their first 3 years or first years, they got enough capital to actually get the infrastructure up. And therefore, we've seen this in a couple other areas where they got high taxes, high capital, high cost of employment to get up, that they're challenging if they don't have additional capital to expand their facilities. In the Monterey scenario, where the tax was hard, they started high. So to come down that low was difficult for them to come to the $4, and they went to $5. What we did find out from when they did drop that rate from the $15 minimum to $8, their revenues went up 40% as a result, because the businesses now knew that they can compete with other businesses and move their product, but also they expanded their facilities because they can have more capital in order to do things. So the goal really is not that you stay there. The goal is that you give them a starting point and evaluate that. And you know, if you wish to move it up, that's your desire to do that. But to see where they can go and assess that in another year or two, and then address whatever additional rate, whatever it may be, if you go above what the recommendation is, because of all those moving parts. And that's really what we were going to at that front end strategically, to try to do it, not to a race to the bottom, but just kind of do that. We have a lot of agencies that have people that purchase land, started their plan, and usually actually got into the land use and the CUP process and came to a complete halt because they have no more funding. And they're just kind of sit there in a stagnant mode. So they're trying to look at how they're going to move forward that with the right capital, win that. And that was kind of what we were looking at from the purposes of the base, until there's a better assessment of what's happening.
Supervisor Patello.
Yeah, I still kind of think that our constraint in our county is going to be facilities, because we're not allowing outdoor cultivation. You know, we have a very limited number of indoor facilities that would qualify for, you know, cannabis. And so that, you know, if anyone was to get into that business, it would be, you know, they have to find a facility that has been built. Maybe some old greenhouses for a seed from a seed company or something along those lines. But I still kind of think that the local tax can't be the constraint for a person going into the business. I just think that there's other cost factors that are more prevalent. You know, I could see if you're be at $15 and you know, 20 miles away, you could pay a quarter of that or a half. You might want to explore it, but you still have some real constraints here as far as a large scale, you know, industry. Yes.
That's all.
Any comments from the public?
See, I got my speaker card in actually before I spoke. I don't know if anybody noticed that.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much. You learned very well.
So here speaking, Victor Gomez with Pinnacle Strategy. I represent probably about 20 companies that are going to be submitting applications for cultivation in San Benito County. And obviously, as you guys know, Pinnacle Strategy was hired to run the Yes on C campaign, and we were successfully able to do that with nearly 60% of the vote. The question continues to come up, what's hindering these businesses from developing? A portion of it has to do with what Supervisor Patello just mentioned, and that's the cost of construction, which is normally around $35 to $50 a square foot for greenhouse development. So there is a significant investment of at least $250,000 to get a facility started, and that doesn't include land. But another component is taxes. Somebody asked me a question. I was a panelist on a cannabis discussion up in San Jose, and somebody asked me, Victor, who makes the most money out of everybody in the cannabis industry? And that answer is simple: government. Nobody makes more money off the sales of marijuana than government. But to answer Mark's question, and I think the concerns of others, personally, I don't think it's at the local level. It's at the state level. The state taxes are absolutely burdensome to the cannabis industry, and that is cultivation, retail, whatever it may be. So I'm actually going to advocate for something, and I hope I'm not on camera here, but I think I probably am, and that's going to be a more reasonable rate of $5 a square foot. I really do believe that's where you need to land. You don't need to undercut other communities. I think you could come in at a very fair rate and still attract the businesses that are going to be coming here and operating. Hopefully with that, as you head to your CSAC conferences and other conversations that you're having with other state leaders, encourage them to look at bills that are being proposed currently that are actually at the state legislature now in committee that are being reviewed to actually lower taxes at the state level. Think about it. They're charging taxes, but what are they doing to help you administer these cannabis programs here locally? Nothing. You're doing it. The county's doing it. We ran Measure C because we wanted San Benito County to have a new revenue source to use as you see fit. We know those dollars are going to stay local. Thank God they're not going up to Sacramento and getting lost. But we want those dollars here here locally. So again, I encourage you to look at more, and I still think it's a competitive rate of $5 a square foot. Keep it there. See where we are in 12 to 24 months. Evaluate the situation. You may only have 4 operators like the city of Hollister currently does, but I hope that you look at it from a business perspective. And one last thing, if I could say, Mr. Chair, I know that the City Managers Association has been talking about this specific topic, and that is tax rates. They are having discussions, and I'm sure probably CAOs across California are having discussions on trying not to undercut each other. Let's all try to find a rate that we could all live with without shooting each other down. That way everybody's successful. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? See none. Bring it back to the board. Any questions from the board members?
Mr. Chair, I definitely appreciate Victor's comments. We don't usually land on the same page, but as a small business owner, I see that the reality that every time I spend quarterly, $3,000 to $5,000 on sales tax, it definitely bothers me. The majority of it goes to the state. The hardest part about that equation is at that point who wins that battle. If there was a way, obviously, for us to keep most of those dollars, then that would be a lot more appealing and make us a lot more competitive. And I'm speaking in general terms, not just cannabis. But I struggle with us lowering even below what the other counties are doing for the sake of the state. And I feel like that's what we'd be defaulting to. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor De La Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just got, express my feelings about the state of California. And that is that the state of California is no friend of San Benito County. And the state would do it whatever it can to rob, our taxpayers than to address our local needs. I mean, we got to push a Measure G to get our roads fixed. In the sake of cooperative working together, I'm willing to support the $5 one instead of the $6, Mr. Chair. I have no problem with that. I'm okay.
Any other questions from the board members? Comments?
I have a comment prior to a motion is made. I'm wondering, I think Mr. Gomez mentioned something about a time, perhaps. Maybe is that something that the board's willing to consider, or perhaps staff can talk to us about maybe if we set it for $5 for a year so we can see if we need to go up to 7 or maybe 24 months. I wanted some opinions on that before.
My understanding, there's 2 ways we can do it.
Okay.
I think we need 4/5 of a vote to change from, is that correct? To change once we come to $5 in order to go up or down, do we need 4/5 of a vote at any point in time?
I don't believe so.
Just a simple majority?
Yeah, I think it's a simple majority.
We can change this. We can change any time we want as long as the board approves it. So there's a really, if we want to put a year in there, we can, Supervisor Gilio, but at any point in time, we can change on the fly. It doesn't have to be set in stone.
Okay. Dulce.
And I have I have the spreadsheet up, and we can plug in any percentages within the range, and you guys can see what the projections are. So I quickly did that for cultivation, making it $5 still. Disregard the title, but I did it under here, and you can see kind of how that plays into the figures.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry. Good morning, Board. I'm going to explain the worksheet that you have in front of you here a little bit. So if we look at the tax assumptions, you had originally for the cultivation $3, $5, and $7 in the range of very conservative to moderately conservative. Making a change in the very conservative column to $5, and we haven't changed the other columns for the other assumptions of $5 for conservative or moderately conservative. But if you do make that change and you keep the other tax rates the same for distributor, manufacturing, micro-business, testing lab, out-of-county delivery only, the number then you come up with is $1.7 million. So what Dulce is doing here is, I think, trying to work with you and figuring out if you were to be adjusting some of the tax rates that were given to you on Exhibit A to adopt as your resolution. Can she work with you here to find where we can settle on certain tax rates, and you can kind of see what that range of revenue would be based upon a very conservative to a moderately conservative tax range. So you can land on different places, and I'm going to bring up this tax assumptions worksheet so she can work with you, and if there's numbers you want to play with, she can do that for the cultivation, distributor, manufacturing, micro-business, et cetera, and then she can go back and show you what the tax range would look like, okay?
With the chair's approval, perhaps could we see what it would look like to match with Monterey, which is 8, 1, 2.5, 2, 4, and 1, just to see what it would compare
8
to.
is for outdoor,
Yeah,
right?
I'm sorry, 5, yeah, because we're not going to be doing outdoor. Sorry, 5.
So 5 would
Yeah.
be 66%, so multiply that by 1.6.
I'm more concerned about because their nurseries is $1.
Oh, okay.
And if we're looking at doing $5 for a nursery as well, I don't know if we should think about
larger
that number as well.
Okay. Supervisor Patella?
Yeah, I'm gonna just throw out a motion that we increase the $3 rate to $5 and the distributor rate, manufacturing rate, micro business rate, out of county delivery rate. I checked that. Yeah, to 4%, and the lab testing to 1%.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did you have any questions? You want to read that back one more time?
I could read it back.
About the nursery.
Oh, the nursery.
Address that at all?
You should.
It's 5%.
Let me.
5 too? Okay.
Yeah, it's 5%.
So we haven't approved the
I was
motion
leaving
just
the
yet,
nursery.
right? I had-
No, sir.
It
Huh?
got approved.
We got a second.
They're at 1.
Yeah,
It got approved. Doesn't matter what county council says. It got approved. The
It
board
was
approved
voted? Okay.
We have a second on the floor right now.
Okay.
Now, what is the wish of the board?
And a clarification on the nursery, Mr. Chairman, I was to leave it at 5 as well, just to be simple. I know that might be a little higher than Monterey, but that's the rate.
Let's go back real quick. I just want to make sure because Supervisor Dela Cruz and I had a little sidebar. Right now, there's a second on the floor. There has been no vote, correct?
Correct.
Can we ask for discussion now?
Discussion,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I just was looking for a little clarity on the nurseries. Monterey County is at $1, and we would be at $5. I don't
Correct.
know if there's any discussion we want to have on that, or we're comfortable making that motion and moving forward.
I think the motion said 5.
For everything.
That's what and I believe the procedure, if we wanted to question it, we have the opportunity
Well-
after the second, so we could talk about it.
Okay, Supervisor Hernandez?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because I mean, on my end, I'm gonna vote no only because the numbers definitely obviously sound better, and I appreciate the discussion of the board. At the end of the day, it's again, as a business guy, it's not how much you make. What are the impacts and what are the costs on our end? And that reality I don't understand, so I can't necessarily support it not knowing the impacts.
Understood. Supervisor Bertello?
For clarification, why I stated my motion that way as far as the 5, this is to be indoor growing, whether it's a full-grown plant or not a full-grown plant. In a nursery, I think for us to monitor it consistently, it would be easier on our staff. You could have a nursery, or you could grow, the full plant. And that's kind of what my thought process was, is at least coming out of the chute, we're not going to sit there and go check how the plant's growing for every single month.
Yeah.
It's indoors. It's a building. Here's the area. We measure it. You pay that tax. That's the reason I kept the rate consistent.
Well,
Supervisor Hernandez?
Mr. Chair, yeah, to be clear, so I just attended, and I forgot to mention a First Five meeting. It was a lot of governing organizations. It was the Sheriff's Department. It was Health and Human Services, Behavioral Health, and they brought up the marijuana money, because the reality is they're dealing with social service impacts, right, when it comes to abuse there's a lot of questions that were created because of that in my mind. So we're getting funding for marijuana to be able to offset and mitigate those costs. And I not necessarily understanding completely if that's direct, but it doesn't matter. I mean, at the end of the day, those are impacts. So there's a lot of impacts, not just oversight. And that's where my questions are. And, again, it's like, as a small business guy, there's a lot of layers to my costs. It isn't just payroll. It isn't just delivery of service. There's a lot of things. So I want to make sure that I understand that, and $5 doesn't necessarily clarify that.
Yes, sir. Supervisor De La Cruz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did we discuss the testing lab already, the rate?
I think you mentioned it. Could you restate the motion for the record so I could write everything down here? I'm sorry, I went really fast.
Supervisor Botello,
of course.
restate the motion, please.
Of course. I make a motion that in lieu of the $3 a square foot, we approve $5 and increase the percentages for distributor, the manufacturing, micro business to 4%, out of county delivery to 4%, and lab testing 1%.
Mr. Chair, I'm the maker of the motion. If the maker of the motion accepts a friendly amendment to your motion to increase
friendly amendments.
Thank you. To increase the testing from 1% to at least 1.25, because it's still very low compared to what the report says. Do you accept 1.25?
Yes.
Okay.
Restate your motion, please.
Got it.
Okay. So it's all right. Hopefully I'll call for the question myself. That we raise the rate to $5.
Okay.
That a distributor and manufacturing, micro business percentages are increased to 4%.
Yep.
And the lab testing to 1%.
1.25%.
Pardon me?
1.25%.
1.25. I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you. and that's originally I second it.
Okay, so we have a first, or we have a motion, we have a second, and I'm going to call for a division of the House, and I want to hear voice.
Roll call vote.
Roll call vote. Supervisor Hernandez?
No.
Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yes.
Supervisor Botello?
Yes.
Supervisor Gilio?
Yes.
Supervisor Medina? Yes. 4-1. It passes.
Chair, if we may, clarification on the retail. I believe you said 4%, and the max you can do is 3%.
You didn't mention
That's why we
retail,
made
I
the
don't believe.
recommendation.
The max you can only do 3%?
Yes.
Why?
That's what the
The voter said that?
Okay.
I don't believe his
Okay.
motion
Okay.
mentioned retail. Actually, I think you skipped
Okay.
over it because we don't have retail. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I think there is
I
a
believe
retail.
on the delivery, you recommended
the
4%.
delivery.
It can only be 3%.
Are you sure about that?
1.25.
No, that's the testing lab.
The board in front of you on the screen right here are your minimums and your maximums that were set by Measure C as voted by people.
Okay.
And so the range can be anywhere within these ranges.
Okay, perfect. Okay, 3%.
I thought it was lab.
Yeah, okay. Good.
You have to amend the
again.
motion.
Yeah.
That was a test run. Let's restate the motion one more time using the 3%, Supervisor Botello, and this will be set in stone for a while. So,
All right. I wish I wrote it down. That we move the rate from $3 to $5 on the per square foot. The distribution is 4%, manufacturing 4%, micro business 4%, delivery is would be 3%, and the cannabis testing is 1.25.
Second.
At first, we have a motion. We have a second. Once again, roll call. Supervisor Hernandez?
No.
Supervisor Dela Cruz?
Yes.
Supervisor Botello?
Yes.
Supervisor Gillio?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Medina? Yes. 4-1. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dulce.
The next item comes out of the county administration to approve a budget adjustment to increase the economic development appropriations in the amount of XYZ, and we'll have Stuart leading this off, and I believe we have a presentation from the Economic Development Committee. Yes, sir. Or
After the presentation.
Yeah. You don't do that right now.
Mr. Chair, while they're setting up, may I request a 3-minute break to use the restroom? Please, while they're getting set up here, one of their meeting.
yes.
No,
Second.
You give a presentation. Then go for that.
Yeah, it's usually after.
A public comment?
Hello? Got to write it down. You got to write it down.
This is a good transition.
Thank you.
So there's a cost, but the cost recovery is through the permit?
It could be 20 or 25,000.
Because they have.
Number of permits. Build that up for total burden cost. We roll it up divided by the number of businesses, and that's what
Is there any way you can get me that information?
what I could do is show you a sample of ones we've done for Riverside County, because they actually didn't even do a tax. They actually just figured the total cost of social services and rolled it up.
Well, because, I mean, I'm imagining those are assumptions, right? Because it's waiting for to a certain extent.
Did a registration.
Yeah. No, I know, but my question is how did they get, how do you know you're going to have so many hours? Just understand the structure and how that, imagine there's a reason to it. I just don't understand it completely.
Yeah, and that's why I just wanted to.
So this one, the micro non-retailer, the max is 3.5, but they said 4 on everything.
Yeah.
Which is except for the lab, 1.5.
Yeah, it's just a little.
So then that would work within the range. Right?
Out of county.
Delivery. The max they can do is 3.
So that's 3. Everything else is 4.
Oh, except for this one.
Yeah.
This one, the max is 3.5 on this.
And was frozen.
How did you guys say no to the break?
There was an error.
Man, I gotta go. Sorry.
They went 4. Across, yeah, he has it right. 1.25, 4, 3, 5.
But the voters only approved that it can go up to 3.5 on the ballot. So we can't charge more than what the voters approved.
True. Oh, you have.
So they said 4 on this one, but the max amount is 3.5.
Looks like it.
Yeah, it is.
Wanted to close it.
That's micro business.
David?
Can we reconvene?
Oh, 3.5 here, micro business.
Did you announce
Gotta bring you one of
Oh,
the fanny packs.
like the grant?
I told him twice.
You know?
And today I'm all like from there, and he didn't see me. I guess he forgot.
They went down.
So it's stuck.
Okay.
I think they're okay, other than the only thing I just wanted to go is 3%. Oh, Mike.
Max is doing
Why is minimizing?
Advance through.
Are you running it? I can go, I guess.
Let's do this. I just copy it on the desktop.
These sticks sometimes are slow.
Yeah, actually,
There's one head
I think that's right level.
The max
I would
level
do.
on this
Thank you for your help.
is 3.5.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry to bring up the nursery thing. I didn't know if you meant it or not, so I just want to make sure that we're all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or if it's, because it's a lot, like the max
I think we needed to have to reset. It's so common for that.
Or we can make a motion that they accept the max
People know
amount.
what they're getting into.
An advance.
Decide if they
Yeah.
want to.
Well, are these max? They're not maxes here.
Oh, they're not.
I
They're
have a
not
hard
worth
time
it.
believing that that would be the.
now we can just advance it like that.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying
Well,
to get their money.
that's why.
Yeah.
But they're,
Yeah,
And
that's why.
I prefer, the people I talked to, I told them I thought rate was what we should.
Can this one be advanced?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could just click through like that.
getting very greedy. They're taking a ton of money.
Yeah, I
Plain narration. You don't have the narration on, right?
We saw on our thing, we did very conservative, and actually we ended up conservative, so
But the
it's a
rest of
respectful
it,
plan.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I hope you don't take that as any disrespect. I really appreciate all your work.
Trying to look at it.
Good to see you.
So we can just say advance. I really don't get, we're just saying the number.
Let me run it by Mark.
Yeah, what's the point?
Yeah, staff report.
That's what I like to hear. We get moving around.
No, because I think it's.
Open this one for the ordinance, like max amount is.
Gotta be a little careful, right? Because imagine if somebody hit our business.
think you're gonna
and said, "Oh, you know, please double your rate."
Right,
Give some
We
time.
really wanted to, like I said, our agency is high rate because the goal is not to have anyone in town. And then
Yeah, just bring it back for that one item.
the goal is to find that balance sweet spot.
And set it.
19.5, like, keep Monterey same, so it's not like they're rushing to Monterey or not
Because
coming.
the motion that
They're
we
still
made
in thing, we got support.
was higher than what was even in the ordinance.
Surprised me. I was like, well, it's
Okay, so let's talk to the chair.
I threw it over to PDF, but at this point, we'll just keep it like that. Leave it this way.
In the future. That's what I would do. Okay.
Yeah. That's why I kind of saw it, but I could be.
And then when the nursery sells it to the cannabis.
Yeah.
Would you be able to make the amendment to that?
To me, it's so much per square foot in the building. I don't know if I'd be, if I was a cannabis grower, I'd be.
Just to make sure. Just to make sure, because things might come up, and I want to make sure.
Okay, we're going to continue on with number 14 out of the County Administration Office. Once again, this is dealing with the Economic Development Corporation.
Good morning, Chairman and your board. I'm going to be speaking today off of the staff report that was put together for your board. Historically, the board has allocated $35,000 towards economic development in San Benito County. Last year, the allocation was to 4 organizations that work within the community on varying economic items, including analytics and presentations and work with local businesses. That is the Monterey County Business Council, the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, the Economic Development Corporation, and the San Benito County Chamber. Your board requested that staff bring some options to actually increase that funding for the current year and potentially going forward in future budget cycles. And provide some alternative recommendations on how to use that funding. We have, for the current year, we are going to be proposing to reallocate $67,000 from the lobbyist budget to economic development in the current year. That is the amount that is left over from our lobbyist contract that ended in January. We can, at the board's request during the budget hearings, going forward into the next year, we can reallocate the lobbyist contract funding going forward towards economic development. Last year, the total amount that was allocated, or for this year, the total amount was $120,000.
Mr. Chair, hold that thought, Sue, what you said, that we can allocate the lobbyists, for future years. I mean, it's a minor, it's immaterial for today's discussion, but the board sets the budget at the budget hearings. And if we don't fund the lobbyists, there's no money. There's no lobbyist money.
Right, but the anticipation is that the total revenues that the county has, recognized to receive in the current year that has been allocated to the certain expenditure areas, the budget units, we could kind of revert that specific funding that we would be using for that lobbyist.
That is correct. The current year we can do that, but not future years.
Yes.
Because you don't dictate how the budget is approved. It's the board of supervisors do that.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The three options that we are proposing to the board is to either hire a full-time economic development coordinator, which has not been, the county has not had. This would be a new position. Similar county position at Santa Cruz County had a fully benefited cost of approximately $150,000. We could also go to the second option, which would be contract with a non-government organization, similar to what happened in the 2007 and 8 fiscal year through the 2012 to 13 fiscal year. We had actually allocated about $50,000 per year. There was a contract, there was a set scope of work, and it included a selection, the county being active in the selection of the executive director, and there were other goals that needed to be met within that contract for the scope of work. Additionally, the third option that is recommended to your board today is to increase the funding to the current NGOs that we have been allocating this funding to, determined by your board in whichever manner you decide to allocate that funding. So with that, I'd open up to the board for your discussion too.
Well, prior to that, would the Economic Development Corporation leader like to do a short presentation?
I'm not sure if my presentation made it onto this computer. Seeing blank faces, I'm going to try to plug this in. Mr. Chairman, if I could pass the package.
I'll grab it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your patience, Mr. Chairman, board. My name is Aaron Johnson. I'm currently the chairman of the Economic Development Corporation of San Bernardino County. My daytime job is with Granite Rock Company. I'm vice president there, and I've been working there for 21 years. Rebuilding the momentum for the economic development. The recession definitely hit economic development activities in San Bernardino County hard. We lost a lot of momentum, and our recovery has been slow. We must rebuild our capacity, and we must add staff. But we have made great progress in cooperating the local organizations that all have their parts and roles in economic development. Working together is critical because we don't have a lot of resources, and we're going to use collaborative practices, and it's well under its way, and you'll hear from a couple of those other non-governmental organizations that are in support of the proposal I'm presenting to you today. Here are the list of our local cooperating organization. We have obviously the EDC, we have the San Benito County Business Council, we have San Benito County Chamber of Commerce, we have the Hollister Downtown Association, San Juan Committee, and San Benito Community Foundation. Plenty of baseline setting. Over the last couple of years, many of you board members have participated in the county's, we all participated, most of the current board members participated in the general plan. Many of you participated in the local economic advisory program, the LEO, the comprehensive economic development strategy that the board approved recently, and the other ongoing work among the local organizations. Now's the time to fully commit to attracting new business, retaining business, and really growing the economy of San Benito County. Today we're presenting a bold 5-year plan to get a full-time economic director housed in the county. And what's going to make this possible is we're going to be able to build teams in collaboration. We're going to clarify our roles and responsibilities among the different governmental or non-governmental organizations in here today. You'll hear that the Chamber and the EDC are not competing for funds for today. We have clarified our roles and responsibilities of the various organizations, and we're going to become very unified on not just crafting our message, about telling the message and amplifying each other's message as we build upon each other. Did I go backwards? So the 5-year plan includes an investment of up to $200,000 a year, $110,000 for the full-time economic development director, up to $30,000 for benefits. The level of support is unknown right now, but there's $60,000 a year for program development. This will be bringing in the right consultants and resources we need to advance complex grant programs and business attraction campaigns. There is a draft 5-year plan in your packet. You'll see on the left-hand side of your packet. The first role of the new director will be to recraft that plan and prioritize it. We will coordinate our efforts, obviously, among all the various governments and associations. And our outcomes are going to be desirable, I think, by all. We're going to retain the industry. We're going to help existing industry thrive and expand. We're going to recruit industry, and we want to bring in more visitors. The EDC is not going to drive the tourism promotion, but we are going to amplify the message crafted by other non-governmental organizations, such as the Chamber and the San Juan Council, and that's part of the clarifications and roles that we outlined. The wine trail and visitation that you guys have heard about, and it's in your general plan. The San Juan Committee is now leading and supported by us. We'll amplify that message. Business attraction, Business Council is obviously going to support our efforts to do our business attraction campaign, and we'll amplify that as needed. We have remember when you passed your SEDS, that allowed us to go after USDA grants. And there's a couple promising grants that we're looking at right now. One is to bring in broadband into the rural areas, high-speed broadband, into the rural areas of the county, and also figure out what opportunities there are for the city. There's also a co-working space and an incubator space, and there's a fellow at the CSUMB who's starting a grant grant application for that end. That are two of the example projects that we hope to get further off the road in addition to that 5-year plan. But that can only happen, honestly, if we have a full-time staff. I've been on the EDC for many years. We have a very active board, but we're volunteers, and we have businesses to run and that sort of thing. Are there any questions, Mr. Chairman or supervisors?
Any questions from the board members?
Yeah, number one, I wanted to thank you for developing such a cohesive plan. I know there's other people in the audience as well that participated. I want to thank you all for doing that. This helps me be able to make an educated decision on where our funds will go, and we're all stewards of the public dollars, so we can report out to our constituents what these dollars are going to. One of my thoughts is that we need to figure out a way to make sure that when we get into a long-term situation, such as 3 or 5 year deal with somebody, how do we measure the outcomes? And I know that can be difficult, right? Because you can't just snap your fingers and go out and get a large multi-billion-dollar corporation to relocate here, and planning, land use, permitting, all these things take time. And I think it would be dangerous to say, okay, how many jobs do we bring in in the last 3 months or 6 months or quarter, if we looked at that every quarter? Do you have any ideas or thoughts on how other economic development directors are measured to make sure that they're being effective and that the money's being used in a wise way?
I do, Supervisor, and your comments are very wise, because systems drive behavior, and if we pick the wrong metrics, we're going to drive the wrong behaviors. One of the things that we have to make sure that we do a very good job in this county is encouraging collaboration among all those agencies I was listed in there. And so if we drive systems that try to drive one agency to take credit for an activity over another agency, we're going to undo the last 3-4 years of collaboration that we've done. So initially, against my best business interests, I would say we're going to have to be pretty loose in the first couple years of what metrics we use to reward and compensate the director. Those metrics will be changed and monitored by the board of the EDC and the governance board, but developing the business attraction plan, doing so many touches on outside businesses, growing revenue with current businesses and tax bases. Those would be some of the metrics that we'd be reporting back to the board on an annual or quarterly cycle, whatever your pleasure is on that.
Thank you. My preference would be quarterly on any reports that we get back. And then also I wanted to make a comment. I'm glad that you're prioritizing broadband. As you know, in today's business industry, whether it's Granite Rock or small business like mine, we rely on broadband internet, and we don't have it served in a lot of our areas, including our commercial areas. And we have some commercial node studies coming up, and we're going to need to figure out how to get broadband to those areas. So working with the USDA to secure those grant funds, we're just going to magnify our dollars. That is key, and I really appreciate that you brought that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Supervisor Hernandez.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I appreciate definitely some of the comments that you made, sir. So, when the biggest concern for me is the bureaucracy of the process, and you use a lot of high-level terminology, which to me it doesn't really anchor to the reality of what the impacts are going to be, or what the actual outcomes that we want to see. When you said outcomes, a lot of the statements that you made which made me. Sorry. Thanks, Elia. So yeah, some of the outcomes that you mentioned, like I said, they were high level, so they didn't really clarify, and it's, I guess in a lot of senses, it kind of reminds me of certain instances where someone was pitching to me, hey, I'm going to market your business, it's going to be awesome. And then they use a lot of high level and, statements that, hey, we're going to SEO, increase your SEO, and we're going to do all these things. But that doesn't anchor into the reality of what actually does increase my business. So to throw money at something is especially with the taxpayer dollars, it puts questions in my mind. And at the end of the day, we have to have strong measurements. And when I hear loose terminology, as far as measurements, then I don't feel comfortable with that. I think we have to have a strong expectation, and personally, I think the report should be a lot more than quarterly. I think monthly would definitely be a lot better report. At the end of the day, if we're spending $150,000, if we really are trying to do this for the best interests of our community, we need to get 10 times that amount back and benefit to our local community in jobs in opportunities, in tourism, all these things that really relate. So I need to see measurements in order for me to support this. I need to see actual, outcomes, and what are the actual outcomes. Broadband is one thing, but even that, if you're spending money on that, what measurements are we going to use to say that broadband actually helped increase business, and how are we actually seeing those results? But I do like the fact that you're talking about clarified roles. I think that's really important. When people know their job, what their job description is, and how to do it, I think that makes for a better result. But then when we're also talking about collaboration, collaboration could either be a whole lot of just networking, or it actually means that we're working together with a common goal, and that common goal means that we're all sharing the same message. But as far as that message goes, I just know historically that from what I've seen previously, and I'm definitely really excited about the new chamber CEO. I know that she's very energetic, and I can see that she has a lot of focus. But historically, I've seen the HDA and the chamber not work too well together. They haven't been very focused. So those are the questions that I have, and I'd rather see a little bit more instead of high level statements. I'd really like to see actual objectives and expectations of those objectives, results driven, basically outcomes. And those results are going to be clear, what we know. That way, when we come back a year later, we see those results. Either they did happen or they didn't happen, and then we can move forward with the decision. I personally think it would be better for us to go with an NGO versus a governmental organization. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Would you like me to respond, Mr. Chairman, to the?
Yes, sir. Please.
Okay. I heard two things there, and the metrics. I understand that, Supervisor Hernandez. Some of the metrics I think that we can look at and we should look at is available industrial space that's unleased, especially at our airport, which is a tremendous opportunity, and we would be taking inventory of other retail space that is unutilized. So we'd like to see an improving trend in occupancy. Also, a very large percentage of our workforce commutes out of this county every single day, and they're spending their hard-earned money in other counties and not supporting local businesses and not supporting local retail. So we'd like to see a reduction in the rate of out of the county and an improvement to the county. So those would be kind of the metrics that I'm looking at or would be proposing to show you. As for the collaboration, I think we've made leaps and bounds, and I think in the public comment section here, you're going to hear from a couple of organizations that you'll hear from them about our new approach to how do we collaborate. We're meeting monthly right now, and we're making sure that we have clear roles and responsibilities and understanding among each other of how we can work together to build all of San Benito County.
Mr. Chair, thank you for making the presentation. I really do appreciate it. It's very apparent that you did a lot of extensive work on it by the presentations and the documentations you've given us. I remember serving on this board when we used to have Al Martinez, and then we had Nancy Martin, and somehow just fall off the cliff, or other members. I just have a lot of reservations about funding this program, I'll be honest with you. Nancy Martin gave me a bad taste. And somehow the EDC has to give me that trust that it's not gonna happen what happened before. I mean, I was one of the ones that said we need to support economic development. In fact, I was one of the supervisors back in the early days when Supervisor Patel and I used to be on this board that we need to reinvest back in our community through economic opportunities. And I was embarrassed because I made a motion and I made a push to fund with her assistance, and it didn't happen. And I'm just not convinced right now. I think I need more time. I need to do more research. I need to figure out the long-term plan. I know you gave me a 5-year. Everything's here. I'm just not convinced right now.
I can respond, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Supervisor. that your concerns are well-founded. I think that if we looked at just performance alone, there would be reasons to have concern for the Nancy Martin error. I would offer that there's a different level of collaboration now among all the agencies. We have a much clearer strategy. That's the comprehensive economic and a big baseline of information and cooperation and direction and agreement on where we want to go that I don't think necessarily existed before. Nancy Martin might not have been the right fit for the outward face of San Benito County, and we'd be looking for somebody who could be a good outward face for San Benito County. And we definitely hope that this economic development director would not be functioning in the same economy as Nancy Martin did in the last couple years when we had the Great Recession. I think it'd be very hard for any economic development director to perform well at the end of the last Great Recession. So I'm encouraged by the business levels. I'm encouraged by the number of people that leave the county right now to find employment. These are all indicators to me that we have untapped potential here locally, and we just need to have an outward, well-told story about the opportunities of our county.
And Mr. Chair, may I continue some of your projects that you want to build on? And because, in fact, about 9 years ago, I tried to push for a free Wi-Fi for our community, and people at that time thought I was crazy. That was the word they told me. I was crazy to think about a free Wi-Fi in our community. And I see here that you're actually one of the projects is to do the Wi-Fi in the county, right? Not the city, because it has to have 20,000 population or less. But it does require a 20 to 50% local matching, and that could get very expensive. And so, if the county does embrace and goes with the program, does that mean in the future you're going to be asking that the county also use a lot of money to support these objectives and goals too, such as the Wi-Fi, which I like it. I mean, that's one of my pet peeves that I enjoy to talk about.
Mr. Supervisor, I think my goals are like yours. I would like to see the state reinvesting as much as they can into our county, and we do as little as we need to do to be effective. I think there's also opportunities to be collaborative with the city, within city limits, on partnering this. It's not just a collaboration of the nonprofits. This is also a collaboration of city and county governments to solve the high-speed internet issue.
Yeah. I mean, I shouldn't talk about this, but our company which is on the corner of Lana and Shelton, for so long we have tried to get internet, and we're using a satellite, and it just slows down our business. And I've talked to our staff about, what can we do to use a T1 connection or something faster. And it's hard. It's hard.
Supervisor Botello.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for making this report. I've been a fan of what the EDC has been able to accomplish for the last few years. I'm very impressed with this 5-year economic development work program. A couple of years ago, you brought to this board a comprehensive economic development strategy, which was absolutely critical for this county to pass and be partnered with, the business community as well as our two cities. And right now, at this point, we have to get serious about economic development. We're either going to be a part of the solution as far as developing a diverse economy in our community, or we just kind of limp along, and that takes an investment. I don't disagree with your slide on that. You need $200,000. My question, and I really hope that we expand on our partnerships with, which you have a very impressive partnerships with the different business organizations in our county, as well as participations from people that are in local government. I've seen your meetings and how well attended they are, how interactive they are, but to make this sizable, this next step, we definitely need to have the participation of the City of Hollister. I agree with my colleague Supervisor Gilio that we if we make this type of investment, hopefully along with Hollister, who will benefit tremendously with job creation and growth and business growth and the grants, because this is where you're going to implement them. Perhaps we should be part of those of the participation on the boards, and then we come back as significant developments happen and make those reports on an ongoing basis. I think that's how I would like to see that partnership, expand and grow. Right now, this county has a tremendous amount of opportunity for business. We're working on zoning, and not only on the 101 corridor, but in other areas of the county that's bring a diverse amount of business and job opportunities to our citizens. If we don't get behind this and somebody shepherd this along, and we're to be left out, because as long as I've been on the board, we've tried to task our RMA department or planning department, put business first. Let's make anybody comes in with a job application or something, they're on top of the pile. It just doesn't work that way. And I really believe that the work that this volunteer group has accomplished has been impressive. Just from the examples I named. But we need somebody that's full-time, qualified, experienced, and to move this forward. I don't think it should come us government county supervisors hiring an economic person and working in RMA. I think it needs to be from an EDC standpoint and somebody that could kind of reach out in different directions. And so I'm very supportive of this, but I think having an idea what the costs are and a little bit of work from, I hope, our intergovernmental people to bring this issue to intergovernmental and bring our cities on board is critical, and to evaluate it for the next budget and project it out. This is not a one-year commitment. This is not where, you hit a dry spell, you quit. This is a commitment to our community, which I hope we move forward with. Thank you.
Supervisor Gilio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for being recognized a second time. I apologize. I had some more thoughts that I wanted to discuss. You mentioned something that rang a bell with me. So you talked about doing an inventory of properties in the area that are attractive for businesses and making sure we have those available. So I was in Sacramento and I was talking with an assembly member named Mark Levine, and he has an interesting bill that's going before their body. Hopefully it makes it. He wants to inventory state-owned property across the state and have a repository of the state-owned property, because he believes that the state is not in the property ownership game. They should be in the, if we have some property, let's make it available at a reasonable rate for economic development. I'm very hopeful that we can do that here as well. County, city property, come up with a list of what's available, what the potential, hurdles are, hazards are, what the benefits are, where it's located, all those things, and we can have that along with the private stuff as well, because I don't personally believe that the county or the city should be involved in owning property. We should try to dispose of property that we have if it's appropriate. Those are just my personal thoughts. Couple thoughts for revenue. So we as a community passed a business license tax in this last year, and my business is going to be paying into that tax. And I know I'm a member of the business council. I can't tell you how many businesses have told me, Jim, make sure you use that money, and they're holding me accountable, and they should be, for business expansion and business development. That's what that money is meant for. That's what it was pitched to us as when we had these presentations come to the business community, and that's what they expect. And this is obviously in my mind, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I believe this is obviously a responsible use of that money. Second, and I have to thank my planning commissioner for bringing this up to me, TOT. So we increased our TOT percentage, and we expect about $150,000 worth of revenue this year in TOT. And one thing I just learned also thanks to my planning commissioner is that we have over 30, possibly over 50 Airbnbs operating in our community that aren't paying a TOT tax, or we're not collecting it. So we as a county need to understand that right away, and we need to start collecting that right away, because that's increased revenue that we're missing, that I believe that could be easily allocated to this business expansion and growth and economic development. So now timing, Supervisor De La Cruz, I really appreciate your comments and your concern about doing it right and making sure that we step back, understand where we want to be as a community, and go forward. And I think to some extent we've been doing that for several months, and the only comment I have, and I don't mean to disagree with you, but is economic development, especially now where we're at in our economic cycle, and you probably know this better than me, being a numbers guy, we need to really jump on economic development now, because we are going to hit some sort of dip in the economy. It's the natural cycle of things. I don't want to curse us, or I'm going to knock on wood when I say that, but as we all know, the economy has cycles. I'm not telling everybody that anybody that doesn't know, and we are going to have ups and downs and dips in the economy, and now our economy is in one of the best conditions it's been, employment, all those things, and I think now we need to strike where the iron is hot and really get out there and hopefully get ahead of this and get ahead of any recession that may be coming. And then I would also, with the chair's permission, maybe whenever all the board's done speaking, I would also like to ask Ray, our CAO, for his thoughts on this, because since I've been here and even before I've been here, the CAO has asked me to attend various economic development presentations, so to speak, or recruitment sessions for businesses coming to our community. And I really want to thank you for all the hard work you've personally been doing and your team to actually bring these businesses to us. And I know that your job as a CAO is very broad. You have a lot of responsibilities. And what I kind of want to get your thoughts on is if you thought it was a good idea to have, and I don't know the answer to this because I'm going to ask you, but if you thought it was a good idea to have like a central repository or a person that once somebody approaches you, you can, obviously we'll still meet with everybody, we'll still talk with everybody, and we probably do it with coordination through this position is the way I would see it. I just want to get your thoughts on that if it's okay with the chair.
Yeah, so through the chair, I think economic development is extremely important. As Supervisor Jaime De La Cruz mentioned, one of the things that we were trying to express to NACO and other agencies, CSAC, RCRC, is the autonomous vehicle. It's $1 billion project. It's a really a state-of-the-art project in our county, and we've been running up against a brick wall with fish and wildlife and other things that are out of our hands or out of our and so those are the things that we've been trying to lobby and make sure that everyone's aware that we need to have economic development in our county. It's important. But I also think too, from a staffing perspective, having somebody maybe in your organization that can kind of help people that want to establish a business. What's the process? If I want to expand, going through the RMA process, having somebody there that one person on point that they could go to. Hey, this is the process. This is the permit you need to fill out. This is what this is who you need to speak with, and we can probably work with you on developing that. That way, it can streamline the process. When people come in, they know what to do. They know where to go. If there's anything that deals with, septic tanks or whatever, anything out of our office or anything in our county. Sometimes, folks get, frustrated, and I think it would be very beneficial to have somebody on point that can help out with those processes and make people appreciate being here in our county and seeing, hey, this is what I need to do, and they know the steps involved with it. So, that's just one thought I had. Also, too, from the NGO perspective, I think that's probably, from my perspective, I think it's the right place to go, the right direction. Obviously, everyone's aware of government and the cost of government and employees, and I think working with an NGO, I think would definitely help facilitate things and move things a little bit more quicker. Yeah. So that's all I had, Mr. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, and I definitely wanted to appreciate. I appreciate our CAO's comments, because that's literally where I was thinking. Is it's about expediency, right? And I get, year 3, 4, we're going to implement a business attraction program. I imagine it's a lot of work. It's a heavy lift to come up with a game plan, right? Because it's like a business plan on how to draw people. And I know that there's a lot of work when it comes to assessment of our current economic status and figuring out what the opportunities are, and then how to create a door for that opportunity to come into our community. So with that said, I mean, that tells me, I mean, when I'm reading through this, it's a pretty broad, which makes it really hard to imagine. It's a heavy lift. So I don't pretend to understand your position, but I just looking at it, seems like it's so broad that it, at that point that there's a lot of slowdown in actual results. So I would like, personally, I think that year 1 and 2 should be about not just trying to create a program, but ultimately implementing that program if we're really serious about economic development. And I at the end of the day, like I said, it's hard to imagine that after 5 years we're going to be happy if we get reports saying these high level things that now there's so many different businesses that come into our community, unless we can actually anchor that the money that we spent and the work that whoever the prospective person is that does the heavy lift, that we can anchor those dollars to those results. We basically connect. Again, it has to do with not just funding things so that we can have network sessions, but it's actually results driven, and that's my biggest focus. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, and I really do appreciate the enthusiasm of the entire board, because I wish I had that support 9 years ago. It probably would have been a different community the way we are today, and I'm happy. But I bring that experience to the table that I went through, and I have to be cautious for that reason. But at the same time, I have no problem, moving forward and supporting some type of time frame. But I know that, Ray, you'll be able to handle, things as what commitment does the county will play in terms of liability, the dollars, who they're gonna hire, and is there any other intangible things that we don't even think of right now from a legality perspective? Just a bunch of red flags we'll start bringing up once we start allocating taxpayers' dollars, and they start hiring someone. It's just there's some issues there. I know for a fact there are issues there, and then in reference to Supervisor Gilio. Just because the engine's hot right now, it doesn't mean we can take a small breather and say, let's talk about it. I think that, the wiser thing to do sometimes is take an actual breather and say, okay, let's talk about it before we jump into it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Public comment, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm a retired contracting officer. I represent the Monterey Bay Procurement Technical Assistance Center. We are hosted by the Monterey County Business Council. I want to make that clear. By way of background very quickly, thanks to former Congressman Farr in 2012, the Monterey Bay Business Council, or Monterey Procurement Technical Assistance Center was formed. Our mission is to help promote economic growth, job opportunities, initially in Monterey County, but currently serving 15 counties: San Joaquin to the north, Kern County, Mojave Desert to the south, Central Coast to the Central Sierra. So quite a range there. We meet that mission by assisting small businesses engaging the government marketplace at the federal, state, and probably most importantly for this audience, the local level. We do that through funding primarily by the Department of Defense, additional funding and support through the County of Monterey, City of Salinas. And that being said, I would note, too, that as a nonprofit, taxpayer-funded organization, again, a nonprofit, all client services to the small business community are without charge, fee, or commitment of any kind. In fiscal year 2016-17, and again 2017-18, as noted in your board letter, thanks to the county, $2,000 per fiscal year were allocated to Monterey County Business Council, and we do appreciate that. So there was discussion at length. Mr. Johnson brought up outcomes. Supervisors brought up matrix, performance, and what have you. Let me offer this, a very telling fact about our productivity. In last calendar year, 2018, in San Bernardino County alone, $466,000 in government contracts were awarded to our clients in this county Now, our operating budget last fiscal year was just over $300,000. So I'll leave you with this thought. I think as a former bureaucrat, that's a very fine ROI for the taxpayer, ratepayer, small business owner in this county. So that being said, we would ask that you favorably consider option 3 for the NGO funding for this item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other speaker cards, ma'am?
Excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, board members, my name is Graham Mackey. I have lived and worked in this county for 40 years. I've owned a business for that 40 years, so I have a little bit of business experience. I'm also a member of the San Benito Business Council, and so I'm speaking from both of those standpoints today. I'm recommending that you support the money to get EDC operational. I think the stars are aligned right now where there is a lot of opportunity. We have a lot less expensive land in San Benito County than our neighboring counties, particularly if you look at Silicon Valley, where land is really expensive. We have people living here that are commuting out of the area that would be beneficial. They could work at home and not be on Highway 156 or 25. So there's a lot of benefits from that standpoint. The local business communities, I'm talking about the Business Council, Chamber of Commerce, etc., that were all listed earlier, they're all working together and will continue to work together to make sure this is successful. We've already spent hours meeting to get consensus of how this should work, and I think the presentation made today was excellent. So I'm asking for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Chair Medina and supervisors. I'm the president of San Benito County Business Council, as well as longtime resident and business owner. I'm just going to voice my support along with what you've heard from Aaron from the EDC and Graham from the Business Council. Again, as Graham pointed out, Aaron pointed out, all of us have been working very closely together for a number of months to get on the same page, whether it be the Chamber, the HDA, the San Juan Committee, the EDC, or the Business Council. We all have the same goal, and that is to bring economic vitality to our community. We may approach it somewhat differently. The Chamber, the San Juan Committee is going to be focusing more on tourism. The EDC, the Business Council, more on economic vitality through expansion of businesses and attraction of businesses. The HDA, of course, specifically on downtown Hollister. But we're all on the same page. We're working together as we speak, and we are all very supportive of this proposal that Aaron has made this morning. From the EDCs and the Business Council standpoint, to bring really the kind of revenue that the city and the county needs, we need to see more jobs in this community. Far too many people commute, which creates lost revenue out of the county, out of the city, as well as traffic problems, of course, that we all are aware of. We need more jobs here, whether it be through expanding existing businesses or attracting new companies. And I think now is the time we need to get aggressive and compete for those dollars that are up in Silicon Valley. Just a couple of other comments I want to make. It's critical that we have a 5-year minimum, we believe. We can't just go at this 1 year at a time. We need a commitment. It's going to take time. Second of all, I wanted to mention that we are going to be talking. In fact, we already have spoken individually to most of the city council members from the city of Hollister, but we are planning to talk to the city of Hollister and possibly San Juan as well, as to help with the funding and their support as well, that has been brought up by the supervisors here today. And, you know, I would emphasize, let's not throw a little bit here, a little bit there. We need to, if we're going to get someone who's highly qualified and a top person, bring in and attract the kind of businesses, companies we want, we need a top-notch person in this community, and that's going to take some cost to do that. And that's all I will have to say, as I look forward to your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. No more speaker cards? Literally.
Oh, literally.
That means something for you.
Good morning, Board. My name is Kate Roberts. I'm the president of the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. And first off, I wanted to thank you for your support of our being part of our member organization. We are Tri-County, Monterey, Santa Cruz, and San Benito County. And we work on the really tough problems that are require getting the sectors and the regions to work on together. Things like affordable housing, transportation, workforce development, pipeline, and broadband. I sent what ended up being a quite lengthy email to Mr. Espinosa and Mr. Nolasco last night, and I apologize for the tardiness of that, Ray. I don't know if you got that, but what I thought might be helpful, economic development is kind of a multifaceted monster. I think you've heard some great input from the speakers thus far, the EDC, the Business Council. They're all doing fantastic work here, and in fact, we wouldn't have the SEDS if they hadn't invested and put all that great work into that. So what I tried to do is showcase from what MBEP's perspective is how we can help support the deployment and the implementation of the SEDS. So I stepped through the three things that I think would be most impactful from looking at things more holistically. There is definitely business attraction and retention and communication within the county that needs to happen to try to get people to move here. And there's tourist attraction that you want to do and reach out to outside the region. What MBAP is really focused on is making it work more efficiently here in the region. So supporting you on your transportation initiative is just one example. Figuring out how to streamline business or building processes. We publish a white paper that helps identify how you can do that here locally. So I just stepped through what we're doing today. I know you guys are really motivated by proof points and actions and what's actually happening. We're not an organization that what we call admires the problem. We like to do stuff and get things done and have lots of proof points. So I think aligning what we've done specific to your SEDS priorities is one way that I would look at it, and that's what I detailed in this email. So around workforce development, the work we're doing around creating a pipeline here for your businesses, around broadband, we're working very closely with your staff to bring hopefully $10 million to the county through a new program that the state has called CASFA loans. And my staff has been working very closely with Ray's staff on that. That's looking really real, that you guys will get $10 million thanks to MBEP's efforts there. We have staff that we use for data. We have tons of data on our website. We can do customized reports. You guys as members, you get access to all that. So there's a lot more things. If you wanted to do an inventory of county-owned properties, as was mentioned, that's something we could certainly help with to build on the data that's already on our website. So anyway, lots of good stuff to talk about. I just think that there, as I said, there's three different ways really to look at it here, infrastructure-wise. Bringing tourism in is certainly complementary to what these other organizations are doing. So thank you for your support.
Thank you. Ms. Salinas.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, supervisors. As an individual who I tend to say that I'm instrumental in having developed bringing economic development to our area, I really encourage you to support this and make a commitment for 5 years. I think that we have the ability, and I've always been a proponent of trying to develop something with the airport and taking advantage of it. And I think this county is really losing out on something like that. So I'd really like to encourage, especially with the ag technology, taking advantage of the fact that we're going to have a new college here as well, new campus out here. There's a lot of things to be able to take into consideration, and I think that on the report was great, and the fact that everybody's working together, there's no conflict on there. I think that we have businesses that all want to succeed. I don't think anybody gets into business to want to fail. So I think this is great for the entire community. I think whether you're a county or you're a city business, everybody's going to benefit. I think especially the broadband. I think Supervisor Hernandez said earlier about how that would affect, and I think that one of the biggest things, and everybody knows, is with regards to that is to have a business to be successful nowadays is social media. So you've got to get out there and you've got to get a website and you've got to try to attract people to bring business to your facility. So I really encourage you all to consider this and to commit for 5 years. I think we have a history. And there are 3 of you that haven't been around the board as long, and there are 2 that have history. But I think it goes way back that we have a history of being able to, we have something in front of us, and we tend to shoot ourselves in the foot, and we say no to something. And I think we have the ability now to go forward, and I think we should think about what's going to happen when you're no longer on the board and you're making decisions for what's going to happen in 20 and 20, 30 years from now, even 50 years from now, because those are the decisions that you're making sitting back there. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other speaker cards? Bring it back to the board, and I'll start off with something. Is the decision for me is rather simple. I've been sitting up here for over 2 years, and from everyone here, I've heard we need businesses in this community. We need industry. We need to keep people off the highway. We need to keep people home. Well, here's our time to actually follow through with what we're talking about. We have to bring money to the Economic Development Corporation in order for this to happen. We can't sit here and pray or hope that something's going to happen. I think looking at the people that are in the Economic Development Corporation at this point in time versus 9 years ago, there's different players. Do we hold the person in charge accountable by different measures, by benchmarking, by a lot of different mechanisms that will show the success? So I think right now, for me, it's a simple decision. I've made a commitment to bring business to this industry or to this county, and I will follow through on that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir, Mr. Dela Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really personally want to say thank you to Johnson, Tiffany, and Graham for coming here and pitching for it. I really do. Because I had a bad taste from the FAS, and I guess the real question is we need to move forward, and I have no problem whatsoever. It's important that we continue to support because in reality, when we campaign, we all say economic development. That's the reality. Every one of us says campaign development. And then once we get elected, somehow we forget what is campaign, what is the economic development. And we have members of the public that remind us every day, hey, this is one of your campaign speeches. And we get it. It's just a matter of us, realizing that sometimes it just takes a lot of work. Just the way Ray said it perfectly is, how do we help businesses submit an application to the planning department, knowing that that's a black hole in there whenever an application is submitted? We all said that. Let's be honest about it. And so we have an opportunity in which, Mr. Thompson and the rest of the members of the public have said, hey, give us an opportunity to prove you right. And I will do that. I think we owe it to the public, we owe it to the community, and we owe it to ourselves too. I have no problem on that. The 5 year, it's an aggressive campaign. It really is. And what that requires other investors to come to the table. such as the City Hall or San Juan Bautista. Even the business community needs to come to the table and say, we're going to do it. And I know Mr. Johnson, he's the first one to bat and says, hey, I'm here today, and I've done the research. On that note, we have, today's March, I don't know, for academic purposes, March 6th or 6th, I don't know.
5th.
And we have about, 30 days, 90 days more before the end of the year. And the motion or the recommendation is to transfer those $67,000 out of the lobbyists and to fund the Economic Development Corporation. And then we have all these other organizations that are also, being considered for funding. And in fact, I think Michelle from the Economic San Benito County Chamber is a wonderful person. I think she has the set skills to drive that organization to the next level. I like that. I'm encouraged. But we need to really hash this out and work with the economic development, because there's a lot of questions, and Ray needs to play a role, and so does Barbara from County Council and the rest of the boards. And I think that we're going to have the budget process pretty soon. And I think the best thing from my perspective, Mr. Chair, is that we provide them seed money today. That's $67,000 from now to the end of this fiscal year, and then let them, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Tiffany, let them make the pitch during the budget process on the 5 years, and then continue to fund these other organizations that are listed here. And I know that the economic development has 13,000. I want to move that 13 and give it to the San Benito County Chamber for a total of 28,000, and then give the economic the 67,000. If we are really serious about supporting our economic organizations, let's do that, Mr. Chair, because this gives us some breathing room for Ray and for the staff and us during the budget process, and for Mr. Johnson to develop and refine that 5-year plan. Otherwise, if we can say, well, let's start working on a 5-year process now, where's the City Hall's position? Where's City of San Juan Bautista's position? We haven't heard from them yet. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I guess,
Supervisor Botello?
Yeah, I don't know if I could support that, Supervisor De Cruz. From my perspective, I think we need to have further discussions as far as the long-term commitment, the commitment of bringing on a full-time EDC director. Just kind of throwing money at. I don't think EDC was requesting that today. And I think what we need is a clear direction, a long-term direction, and that needs to be vetted out with the budget process. I think we just, fund balance the lobbyist money, and our Supervisor Hernandez and Supervisor Gilio on the intergovernmental committee bring this forward to and talk about expanding the partnerships as far as funding this. And I could be wrong, and maybe staff or Mr. Johnson could help, or somebody that knows more than I do. I kind of feel that I want to get away from funding Monterey County Business Council, Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. I think that could be centralized within EDC, and we fund EDC, and then they go and participate and represent our area, our county, and 2 cities a little bit better. We've been kind of putting money to these organizations. I think they do good work, but I get the emails. I don't have the time to go to those meetings. I think EDC would be a more of a centralized representative of our efforts for economic development, and the funding to be partners in it probably should come out of that non-governmental agency, and hopefully people on their board could attend regularly, participate, and express, our needs regionally as well. That's kind of how I see it. Just to throw money at the San Benito Chamber of Commerce right now, I don't know about that one. what we do need is the qualified, a highly skilled director that could acquire EDA grants and USDA grants, and then we parlay, those resources into our efforts. And I see that is where we're lacking right now, and that is part of the economic development strategy that we have in that 5-year plan. I hope people didn't think I was being rude by reading it, but I was interested, and that's where we got to go. We have to convince our partner local government agencies to contribute their fair share and let this run its course for a period of 5 years. I think today is too hard to make that decision, but we have time to do this before our next budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Gilio.
Thanks. Yeah, so Supervisor De La Cruz, I definitely agree with where you're headed, and Supervisor Patello, I understand where you're headed, and I think we're all kind of saying the same thing here. So today we have, and you're talking about putting the balance of the $67,000 on top of the 35 into, $32,000. You're talking about just putting it into a balance. I propose that we examine funding all the organizations as listed, with the exception of, let's start our commitment to the Economic Development Corporation. If we strike out the extra $32,000, that comes out to $45,000 total. Then you add up $2,000 for the Business Council, $5,000 for the MBEP, $15,000 for the Chamber, and then you have $67,000 total. And also, I'm hoping today we as a board can unanimously say that we support this for 5 years at a range of whatever we decide, whether it's $100,000 or $125,000, because what's going to happen is I believe that the folks that all spoke here today are going to go to other organizations like San Juan Bautista. They're going to go to the city, and they're going to say, well, what's the county going to do? And then we're going to be in an endless feedback cycle of, well, who's going to go first, so to speak. And I can tell you that I personally spoke to, I think, 4 or 5, let's just say 4 for sure, city council members, and they're very supportive of your thoughts and your plans, and that's where I think that needs to go. I think you need to do the same presentation with them, and also I think Supervisor Hernandez and I, through the Intergovernmental Committee, need to make the pitch as well. But I think that's where you're going to get the real commitment, is when you go talk to them in open session. So what I'm prepared to do today is allocate $45,000 to the EDC, and also have a commitment of at least $100,000 for 5 years from the county, so that we understand, or our partners understand where we're coming from, and that we're committed, and then they can make a decision on us. And then what we can do in budget time is we can, I think is completely appropriate time to allocate that. We shouldn't be allocating $500,000 for 5 years from the dais today. We should be doing that during our budget cycle. And I just want to reiterate that these funds will be coming from new sources of revenue, specifically a business tax that we promised would go to support local business, and TOT tax. Those are two things that we've increased and we didn't have in the past. And the $100,000 a year, by the way, is a very small percentage of the TOT. And I think the estimate was about $600,000 a year on the business/mining tax. So that's a huge, amount of money. Plus TOT, you're at $750,000, and we're asking for $100,000. A very small percentage to go back, and I hope we can increase that to do different things as we find out new good ideas. Those are my thoughts, and I'm prepared to make a motion after all the comments.
Yes, Supervisor Hernandez.
So, I appreciate Supervisor Gilliard, what he was mentioning. I definitely support. That's definitely wise to consider the business tax and the TOT tax and its new revenues. So it's outside of our current cost, and to be able to to fund this. My big thing is definitely, if we're going to talk about a 5-year program, we really have to have solid benchmarks. Otherwise, you're throwing money out without a long-term expectation of results. And the pie in the sky stuff doesn't, it just, I need to see tangible. So when I'm talking about benchmarks, we were mentioning actively recruiting hotels, tours, and visitors. So that's a tourism focus. I'd like to see a benchmark. What does that mean? How is it better now? And how is that economic development actually bringing dollars into our community? we're talking about business attraction program, recruit new businesses to the existing industrial and business parks. We need a benchmark for that. We need to know what our current situation is and what is the outcome after the fact, after we put this efforts moving forward. And then a unified marketing is basically what I'm hearing with what I've read. What is that message going to be, and how is that actually going to resonate with the public or with the traffic that we're trying to attract to come to our community, to see the beauty of our community and see why they would want to invest in our community? So there's got to be a lot more solid expectations. To me, a 5-year program as a business, it makes sense. You want a long, if you're going to invest, you need a long-term commitment, so that way when you're investing those dollars in your community, those dollars you're able to allocate dollars, so that way you can reinvest and grow your business and do more things with it. So there's got to be that measurement, but it really is for naught if we don't have benchmarks in the first place, if we don't have that solid understanding. So to me, I feel like this strategy is definitely very it's very encouraging, but it's at the same time there's so much there that I feel like it's a lot to chew on, and that makes it really hard for us even to support necessarily all of it in just one easy fail swoop. So I wish it to be a little bit more simplified and have even short-term goals as well as long-term goals. And at that point, we can really assess whether we're being successful or not. So I'm more than willing to support Jim Gillio's mention, but I want to make sure that what we're doing is going to actually have benchmarks tied to it for me to fully support it going forward.
Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was hoping that the board would agree to allow what Supervisor Hernandez's questions are. During the budget process, all those questions will be actually entertained, and we'll get a clear picture of what and how we want to finance. Because the city hall San Juan Bautista need to come to the table too, no doubt about it. And I just feel that giving them money right now it doesn't serve the purpose of that. I think we need to provide some type of seed money to them today, because we have that flexibility in our agenda, and I also want to fund the other groups. So one thing for sure, I will. If there's a motion on the table, I will support allowing them to come to the budget during the budget process to sell their 5-year plan. But if it doesn't include any funding of these groups, I would not support that motion.
Can I hear a motion, please?
I'll make a motion, and it's going to be a little bit long, and I apologize, but I think it's important. Today, I make a motion that let me bring up my notes here. Sorry, my iPad shut off on me. I make a motion that we fund the Monterey Bay Economic Council for $2,000, the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership for $5,000, the Economic Development Corporation for $45,000, and the San Benito County Chamber for $15,000. That total equals $67,000, which is the balance of the leftover funds from the lobbying fund. And I would also like that we make a tentative, I was going to say conditional, but tentative agreement to fund the Economic Development Corporation Director for 5 years for $100,000, pending other commitments from other agencies, as well as making it through our budget process so that they have some guidance.
I call for a division of the motion, Mr. Chair.
Used and granted.
So you got a second already, or?
Is there a second?
I have a question.
Do we have a second?
If you pull out the $100,000 commitment, I'll support the motion.
You're not comfortable with the tentative commitment?
Nope. I want a real nice, healthy discussion during the budget process.
I'll give a second.
And I could interject on.
I'll give a second.
Okay, question. So I understand from your motion, say hypothetically Hollister doesn't commit to the other half of the funding. We're reevaluate as far as we dedicate that $100,000?
Yes, and my thought behind the motion is we need to stake a position in the ground so that our other government organizations can say, look, the county is tentatively committed as long as we are. If not, we're going to end up in a circular argument. It's going to go to them. They're going to say, what's the county doing? So if and when our Hollister, especially Hollister, our partner, is not willing to pony up the matching amount of funds, then we need to reevaluate and take a look at it through the budget process.
And as a caveat, that would be through the annual budget process each year, and that's a goal to fund it for 5 years.
Correct.
And I just want to understand, maybe EDC could answer this question with the $45,000 or whatever is a change. Is there a plan for utilizing that money now?
May I approach, Mr. Chairman? Yes, we would try to go after those 2 time-sensitive priority projects that we have listed there. So that would be the broadband, whose grant applications coming up quickly. So we're going to have to get outside services for that. We'll have to do consulting services to understand feasibility analysis from within the city limits and in the county. I'm not quite sure if we can make a $45,000 stretch, but we do have some reserve funds in the EDC that perhaps we can aim it at that way, and then that should allow us to do some basic level servicing to the grant application process for the workplace and incubator project that's going on with the CSUMB. Both of those are time-sensitive projects and are coming up the next couple months.
All right. And what we had with the other part of the motion was that our allocation of that $35,000, the way I understood it, we're just keeping it at the same level as last year. Did that make any sense, what I kind of stated, that maybe the EDC, if this thing kind of all came together, that they would be more a clearinghouse of participation in these regional groups?
I think that would be appropriate because that would be the person that would be telling the story of the county and looking for opportunities in other partnerships throughout.
Okay, that seems like a reasonable use of the money. I'm going to tend to support this.
Supervisor De La Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so now you explain it to me, Supervisor Gilly. Okay, I'm okay with that now.
Okay, thank you, sir.
But I also have another question for Barbara and Stuart. God, I went blank. Sorry about that, Stuart. If we do make a commitment to support 5 years funding, and say in year 3 the economy just hits, and then we're before here make a decision to lay off a deputy or cut library hours, or I don't know, just an array of general fund departments. If we make a commitment 5 years, that means we have to commit them for the 5 years, correct?
No.
I believe we can write the contract in a form that would allow us to opt out at any point in time.
If we're in a bad economy, then they don't get priority over all other departments, and that's my concern.
Yeah, there could be a non-appropriations clause.
Okay, it's looking good then. Okay.
So I had a question, Mr. Chair.
Sir.
Supervisor Gilio, I could definitely support your motion, but I wanted to see if you would be willing to amend, at least including even during the budget time when we go through this again, benchmarks. Like, I really want to see there's got to be measurements that we can understand that have an expectation of results, and that would give us a clause even first a lot more stronger case on how to change direction if it's not working.
Okay, I accept that friendly amendment, and then I'd put it out for a second again based on that friendly
And I'll
amendment.
take the second. You want to do roll call? What's the, let's have a vote. Peter?
Yes.
Jaime?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
5-0. Now the long-awaited number 15, Health and Human Services Agency.
We have Enrique here to present this particular item. He's our Health and Human Services Deputy Director. Enrique?
Thank you. Still good morning. Good morning, members of the board and the public.
15 minutes.
My name is Enrique Arriola, Deputy Director for Health and Human Services Agency. The division that I manage is Community Services and Workforce Development. Wanted to give you a brief update presentation on the Workforce Development Board, but let me open this up real quick. And also the Certification Hallmarks of Excellence overview. Under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, local workforce development boards are required to maintain and operate effective America's Job Centers. These America's Job Centers are required to maintain a level of certification at least every 3 years. And there's 2 levels of certifications that we are required to meet. And one of them is baseline certification, and the second is hallmarks of excellence certification. I'm very happy to say that both certifications, we have met them, and the State Workforce Development Board has approved the level certification. And I'll go over the certification a little bit, but I'd like to highlight just a little bit the services that are offered at the America's Job Center under the Workforce Development Board. So streamlining services through a one-stop service delivery system is a general philosophy, including different partners that we have there at the center. Everything that we do is based around training, workforce development, job placement into high-demand, high occupations, and getting our workforce more prepared and working with us as well. The vision of the San Benito County Workforce Development Board is to have a trained, skilled, and relevant workforce that meets the needs of employers and increases the quality of life in our community. Earlier today, we tried to get this PowerPoint going, and we couldn't quite, so I'm going to be maneuvering this the way that I am. So there's different services that are offered at the America's Job Center under the Workforce Development Board. One is business services, and the main goal here is to engage with our local business sector in a variety of different strategies, including on-site employee events, helping promote their positions, meeting different needs that we work with the business sector. We have a whole, maybe about 15 computers for the public to use for labor market information, job search, and other needs. We have job readiness workshops for individuals that have a need for improving their skills and having a better opportunity to get placed and getting jobs. Vocational training, we have our program that pays $5,000 for individuals in need of vocational training. This is classroom training. Every year we serve, I'm going to say about 25 or so individuals, and that's based on funding that we get from the state. We have our work experience program for both youth and the adults. We hope to get individuals trained in different occupations within our community primarily. Our expanded subsidized employment program is a program that places individuals in different occupations for up to 1 year. And on-the-job training is on-the-job training as it reads. And this one pays up to 50% of employer costs to train individuals in need of a workforce. And also there's job placement partner services that are offered at the America's Job Center. And we have a number of employer events and collaborations with the chamber. We've hosted different job fairs in the past and so forth. So, and a whole bunch of employer events also there at the facility. So we have a number of partners. Just really quick, EDD is our co-operator. State California Department of Rehab is also there. Peninsula Family Services, they focus on individuals over the age of 55. HHSA, CalWorks Employment Services, Community Action, Gavilan College as well as one of our on-site partners. These are the different types of occupations, and there's others, but this is a list that I wanted to briefly just mention. Electricians, HVAC, medical coding, pharmacy technicians, phlebotomists, truck drivers, water operator maintenance tech, and this water operator maintenance tech is actually a field that is in high demand. It's forecasted that over the next 3 to 5 years, approximately 50% of the workforce will be retiring, and there's a big need in this industry. The Workforce Development Board under the local plan identified the following sectors that we hope to target. One is healthcare, agriculture, construction, manufacturing, retail, and information and technology. So as we place individuals, job seekers in in different trainings, we hope to target these sectors. Just a quick glance on unemployment rates. If we compare the last quarter of 2018, so labor force in October, November, December, 31,000, a little over 31,000 for also November and December. The unemployment rate, unemployed individuals, 1,300 in October, 1,400 in November, and 1,600 in December, which translates to the unemployment percentage for October, 4.2%, 4.4% in November, and 5.3% in December. And if we look at the rates comparing San Benito County, California, and the United States, you could tell that our unemployment rate is higher than the California percentages here. So wanted to briefly highlight that. We belong in the state of California, there's approximately 49 workforce development boards, and each board is grouped in different regions. We are in the Bay Peninsula region, which includes also the Workforce Development Board of Sunnyvale. It's NOVA. NOVA also manages the San Mateo region. City of San Jose Work to Future, and San Francisco Workforce Development Board. This is the region that we belong. We've been in this region for about 4 years. Prior to that, for many years, we were under the Central Coast region here with Monterey, San Luis Obispo, Ventura, Santa Cruz. But we actually requested to transition into this region primarily because we have a commuter workforce in San Benito County. Approximately 60% of our workforce commutes outside the county, with about 80% of those commuting to the Bay Area. And we felt that because of the high number of workforce going to the Bay Area, we fit nicely in this area. So we were accepted by the State Workforce Development Board. I wanted also just to mention now with the under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, every Workforce Development Board is required to have an AJCC operator. This operator is intended to be more independent assessment of AJCCs to help coordinate the activities among the on-site partners with services being provided to the public. And this is a requirement of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and also to conduct the Hallmarks of Excellence designation assessment. So I wanted to introduce David Marioni, who is a consultant hired to help us through this process, and I wanted to invite him over and go over a couple of slides on Hallmarks of Excellence.
Thank you, Enrique. Good morning, members of the board, Chairman Medina. My name is David Marioni. I'm serving in a contractor capacity for the AJCC operator. I also serve as the Workforce Development Board Director for the County of Merced, and I'm a resident of San Benito County lifelong. And so I wanted to bring this up and kind of walk you through what that assessment looks like and why it matters, right? So with this assessment, what the state has asked us to do through the federal law is to look at 8 hallmarks, right? So Enrique mentioned there's a baseline certification. You have to go through some minimal processes to even be allowed to have the funds in your community. So Enrique and the Workforce Development Board have done a great job of ensuring that that's able to happen. We want those funds in the community. So they're looking at 8 items. They're looking at the physical location and the facility, that it enhances the customer experience. Also that the AJCC, and that's the America's Job Center of California, formerly the One Stop, ensures universal access with an emphasis on individuals with barriers to employment. So we want to make sure that the folks coming in that have the most challenges are able to succeed in the center. The center is set up for them. Also that it actively supports the system through effective partnerships. So a few slides ago, Enrique mentioned the partners that are actually on site in the building. The AJCC provides an integrated customer-centered services. So the customer-centered approach, right? Using terminology that makes sense to a job seeker rather than acronyms for government employees, right? So talking about the on-the-job training program rather than an OJT, right? What's an OJT? Job seekers may not understand that. Also looking that it is an on-ramp for skill development and the attainment of industry-recognized credentials, which meet the targeted regional sectors and pathways. A few slides ago, Enrique mentioned certain industry sectors, right? So in workforce investment, you want to make an investment of these precious dollars. San Benito County is one of the lowest funded throughout the state. You want to make sure that you're investing into career pathways where the participants that receive these credentials can move up. We don't want to invest into dead-end jobs, right? We want to invest into careers. Next, it actively engages industry and labor and supports regional sector strategies through an integrated business service strategy that focuses on quality jobs. So one of the mandates that will actually come through the Workforce Development Board is for the board to do research and look and define what a quality job is. And that'll be a policy decision of the Workforce Board to then set services around that to help people attain that. You also look at a high-quality, informed, and cross-trained staffing model. Like Enrique mentioned, you have multiple partners in the building. Folks should be able to talk about each other's services, right? One of the items that really hopped out on the assessment when you look at all of the other areas throughout the state is the Workforce Board in San Benito County has the partners that are required in the facility. And so for a job seeker, they're not having to go from here to there and try to navigate, is it a Department of Rehab service? Is it an unemployment question? Do I want job training? Everybody does some of it. No one does all of it. So collectively, by having them there, it's a richer customer experience. Not to mention you have your TANF services connected, in the same area, along with the food bank, a few short steps away, along with the shelter. So the setup, when we did the assessment of it, really stood out in the eyes of the state as actually having all of those required elements there, which is no easy task. So what we did, and I'll save you from walking you through every score, how the process works is you're rated on a 1 to 5 metric. To have, to receive the ranking, you need to have a 3 in each area and have a collective score of 24 or more. And so going through each of the items, the score came through at 27. What happens next is their board will adopt a continuous improvement plan where they look at each one of these items and have a few to-do action items after each one of these to get through 2020. At the end of 2020, they'll resubmit. This is a biennial process that will have to be completed. And they'll look, did you meet the requirements? Did you do what you said you were going to do? And you have to report out on the progress on this. So, how does this all tie together? Even with today's meeting, we talked about economic development. And when the county's strategy, unfolds, workforce development needs to be at that table. This is the complementary services that go with economic development. As you bring in new business, Enrique and his team should be at that table to provide those services, to hear from those businesses, and maybe there's a pivot. We talked about on-the-job training programs. That can be something you use to attract new businesses to the community. That, hey, when you come in and bring in your new workforce, we can actually give you reimbursements to help train them rather than depend on a school system to train them because some of these jobs are going to be so specialized. The Hallmarks of Excellence designation gives you, it makes you look much better in the eyes of the state when applying for new grants. There's a lot of discretionary money that comes out of the California Workforce Development Board that this would become an item that you could speak to when applying for those grants. As well as when you apply to other granting organizations throughout the state. So, an earlier item talked about today was the fees on the cannabis industry and the fact that the state, is reaping those rewards and not much is coming back out. Right now, GoBiz through the governor's office has a draft of a grant application that you can provide feedback through March 8th. It's in response to the war on drugs, funded with some of the cannabis revenue to actually help communities where folks may have been impacted by sentencing and convictions related to the war on drugs. In assessing that, San Benito County would qualify for that. There's anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000 of potential grant funding that could be used to support activities at your homeless shelter. So these are these are ideas and plans that you can do with this designation. So as a resident, extremely excited to know that this is in the community. They're doing a fantastic job, and as a board, you have a tremendous resource in your community to refer your constituents to. So that concludes the presentation, and Enrique and I would be more than happy to entertain any questions.
Supervisor Botello.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for your presentation. And, you know, Enrique, you've done a real good job down there at Workforce Development, the One-Stop Center. And, you know, as the grade kind of shows, it's good. I know you're on social media all the time with different programs. And as one supervisor, I want to express what I think. You're doing a good job, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can add another supervisor to that list. Thank you very much. I've been to a couple of your Workforce Development Board meetings, and I appreciate all your efforts. Thank you for the report.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Any public comment? Back to the board. It's just a presentation.
That was just a presentation. Just a presentation.
So that concludes our open session.
We have one more regular agenda.
Thank you.
Number 7, Mr. Chair. If that's okay.
Number 7. Sorry.
Okay, I'd like to invite up Edgar Nolasco. He's our Deputy County Administrator, and he's going to go ahead and present this particular item. Edgar.
One more. Sit down.
You guys need to stretch? Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board. Today we're here to present to you a 180-day waiver for one of our employees who have now retired and we need to bring back to help. The probation department, Rita Campbell, retired, and with that retirement took a lot of expertise and knowledge with her that the department really needs to move forward. And today we're asking for you guys to consider an 180-day waiver for CalPERS to bring her back for extra help.
Questions from the board? Supervisor Gillio.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the concept at all. One thing that I talked to the county administrator about, I said, you know, if we have I don't know if you guys do attrition planning or if you look forward in all the different departments, okay, this year we're expected to lose 4 or 5 people. Perhaps we can do an overhire early. And the only reason I bring that up is, and I think I've heard that the county had an issue here as well. If we violate the PERS rules, there are severe economic consequences for the county as well as the employee, and it's even worse now for the employee with the new rules. So I just want to see a very accurate counting and assessment of the amount of hours that you guys are going to use, and maybe even 2. There's one person that checks it and somebody else that verifies it, because in my old organization we had problems with this as well, and it can cost you a lot of money. Thank you.
That is correct, Supervisor Gillio. This is why we're presenting this to you, to get that waiver. As of AB 340, it doesn't permit people to retire and come back extra help right away. There's 180 days they must wait, 6 months, and that's what we're in front of you to get that waiver. On the other part, we are actively considering changing our policies to do overhires to not to do this, and also starting a succession plan to alleviate other departments that may be in the same boat.
Mr. Chair, if I may add one more comment to that. Sir. So with regards to hiring our budget officer, we've actually gone through that process where we actually had Stuart. We hired Stuart, but we went to your board to do that, to have an overlapping of the positions. Normally, our county, just for the new board, we have never had that available. We've always, when an FTE ends their employment, we can then hire a new. So there's no transition of information. So we've been talking with HR. I've been working with them on. We need to kind of redo our policy to make sure we can do that and have an overlap for training purposes, as well as looking at other options through CalPERS with. Partially retiring at 50% and working part-time if there's a need to have somebody on over a period of time for training purposes, where then we don't have that issue with CalPERS. Yeah.
Any public comment? Bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the item as listed in the agenda and with the caveat of extreme monitoring, let's call it.
Is there a second?
I second it, Mr. Chairman.
All in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Now we will move to close session.
Mr. Chairman, are we going to take a little lunch? I have a meeting at 12 o'clock, actually. I know 3 items, but it might take some time.
No, I don't want to take it.
Well, okay.
Let me read the items into the agenda.
Oh, no.
Number 16, should I, closed session, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, subdivisions A and D1 of section 54956.9, name of case, County of San Benito versus Amerisource Bergen Drug Corporation, et al., United States District Court, Northern District of California, case number 518 CV 02733. Number 17, closed session, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation pursuant to D2E2 of Government Code Section 54956.9, number of cases, 1, facts and circumstances justifying the closed session as potential litigation relating to county's actions and policies under the Letterman-Petras Short Act. Number 18, closed session, public employee appointment, title, Assistant County Administrative Officer, Government Code Section 54957. Number 19, I'll continue to the next meeting so the RMA director could be present. And number 20, closed session, public employee performance evaluation, County Council, Government Code Section 54957. Any public comment?
Mark. Mr. Public comment?
Done. So are we going directly?
We're going to go to lunch.
Lunch and be back at what time?
Are you going to lunch?
Oh, okay.
We're going to close session.
Anthony?
You guys worked 3 hours and you guys want to go to lunch?
No, we can't. No, it's going to take long.
Yeah, we do. So it was a good motion. I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, basically it sounded like it. Yeah. Right. You're welcome. No problem. It was a good motion.
I was going to maybe see if I probably was inappropriate time now, but maybe doing some type of. I think committees have a negative connotation, but maybe somebody like you or me or somebody can be part of that. Like go to their board meeting. You know what I mean? Just be like an adjunct.
Yeah, that's how I'm gonna learn.
So we have somebody watch it closely. Yep.
I forgot that you had to be over there at 12. I'm sorry, we're going to do this other one first. I'm sorry. You can, Alan, we can just do opioid numbers. Okay. You want me to wait outside? I'll just leave my stuff. Okay. No, this is going to be.
you.